Hello, good morning. You're welcome to The Big Issue. The Big Issue is your incisive analysis platform for current affairs. On Saturdays, the platform also for riveting conversation. My name is Salom Adunu. I'm happy to have you this morning. This week, as always, has been an interesting one, laden with a lot of economics and political matters. This week, the IMF graciously, passed Ghana. The board of the IMF passed Ghana for its extended credit facility program, $3 billion, that is, for a period of 3 years. As of yesterday, we understand some $600 million hit Ghana's accounts. That should be quite some good news. At least analysts have said that it has saved us from doom. The question is, this is about the 17th time we've been at the IMF. How different will this one be? Will this one be the mother and the end to all IMF programs? How committed are we going to be to the targets and the conditionalities that the IMF, has agreed with us to implement, if you like? How does this IMF program help Ghana in terms of restoring policy credibility, giving us access back into the markets? And the finance minister has said that we are not going to be in a hurry to continue borrowing. But it appears borrowing is a very big part of everything we do. Without that, it appears that our economy will be in a difficulty. We'll look at all of that. And also find out what we can be doing domestically to grow our economy. What has become of the major programs, call them the flagship programs, 1D, 1F, Planting for Food and Jobs, and all of that. All of those programs intended to put Ghana on a certain economic pedestal. Have they failed? The IMF or the finance minister has also said that social protection programs will not be touched. School feeding program, free SHS, and a few others, LEAP, etc., will not be touched. It's important that the vulnerables in society are cushioned, and that is exactly what they will be hoping to do. So we'll look at all of that, the IMF program, how we got here, whether indeed Ghana can be doing anything differently to ensure that we get back into our feet better and then we don't get back into this situation again. Mind you, there's an election coming up next year, and as has been the case over the last few election cycles, in election years, we tend to overspend. Are we going to overspend this time around? The conditionalities or targets by the IMF are quite stringent. Are we going to stick to that when we have an election to win, or we are going to put the economy before the politics and ensure that the economy is back on its track? We will look at all of that today. Quite an interesting discussion it's going to be. Also, the NDC last week held its primaries, parliamentary and then presidential. No surprises there for John Mahama, the overwhelming favorite. He came out with some 98% of the votes. Prior to that, Comrade Dufour, who many thought gave him some competition, also withdrew from the reciting irregularities in the processes, etc. Mahama has been speaking. He addressed the nation from Tamale, where he outlined a number of things, key amongst them being restoring the licenses of the banks, some of the banks that were closed down. How feasible would that be? He also talked about reducing the size of government. He said 60 ministers. Is that doable? And a few other things he said. We look at the NDC generally, how prepared they are for the big election in 2024. Also, some big wigs in parliament fell. They didn't win their primaries, and so they are not returning to parliament. Dr. Kobna Donko, former power minister, ABA Fuseni, whose defeat struck many, the Proverbs man. He's also not returning to Parliament, which means Parliament will be missing the Proverbs and all of that. And a few others. Also, Sam George appeared to have silenced his main opponent, getting in excess of 1,000 votes when his challenger got barely 700 votes. compared to the last time. This is a shellacking. What happens in that space? We'll look at all of that in the second part of the discussion. As always, the show is live and interactive. Join us via your WhatsApp line 0549 986 996 0549 986 996. You can also join us via 020444 7033 020444 7033. This is 97.3 City FM. My name is Selam Adonu. I'll return, introduce my guests, provide some updates, and then we'll get a discussion underway. Once again, you're welcome. You're welcome back to The Big Issue on 97.3 City FM. This morning are looking at the IMF deal with Ghana. The IMF has said that Ghana has been hit by external shocks in recent years, like many other countries. However, they say that our situation was exacerbated by pre-existing fiscal and debt vulnerabilities, which aligns with what a lot of the people have been saying. Government over the months is sought to attribute this mainly to COVID and Russia-Ukraine war. The IMF is saying that yes, external shocks in recent years worsened the situation, but there were pre-existing fiscal and debt vulnerabilities, and that really is where the matter is. So the IMF board approved some $3 billion extended credit facility arrangement for Ghana. And as of yesterday, we had $600 million of that money is hit Ghana's account. That should be some relief for the managers of the economy and for the country generally. We want to look at all of that, a road to the IMF, what we can be doing. This is the 17th time we are there. How different is this one? What can we do to ensure that we don't return to the IMF again or shortly after this? Mind you, we just left the last program in 2019, and between 2019 and 2022, it's about just 2 years or 3 years, and we are back there again. Never mind the issues about external shocks. The IMF has dealt with that, I think. So we will look at that, generally the IMF, and then we will also look at the NDC, John Mahama's victory and the NDC's campaign. Many of the incumbents losing their seats, their tickets to get back to Parliament, and Mahama being the candidate now. We don't know who he will be facing from the NPP, but that is led between the 8 or 9 persons, with frontrunners Alan Chirmantin and Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia. So let me provide you some updates of the happenings for this week. Now, the Executive Board of the International Monetary Fund, the IMF, has approved Ghana's $3 billion bailout request aimed at reviving the country's crippling economy. The decision was made during the Executive Board's meeting held on Wednesday following Ghana's receipt of financing assurances from the Paris Club. A statement by the IMF indicated that, quote, the Executive Board of the International Monetary Fund approved a 36-month arrangement under the extended credit facility in an amount of $3 billion. End of quote. According to the IMF Executive Board, the decision will enable an immediate disbursement of $600 million. The money is reported to have hit the accounts of Ghana. That's as of yesterday. Meanwhile, the government has also given renewed assurances that it is not in a rush to go back to the international capital market following the approval of the $3 billion external credit facility with the IMF. City News' Neil Atilati has more in the following report.
At a joint Ghana-IMF press conference on Thursday, the government reiterated that the loan facility agreed by the IMF will not be misused. Finance Minister Ken Ofori-Atta says Ghana's macroeconomic stability will soon be realized, adding that the government is being measured with objectives on returning to the international capital market.
What you believe will be a precipitation of our return to the international capital markets. On the issue of borrowing, I mean, the reason for this program is to bring us down to 55% debt to GDP ratio, and that program will hold. Really, in addition to the revenue measures that we saw in the budget and that improving our GRA, that will give us the resources to move forward. Curtailing and managing our expenditures are going to be important. No, there's no rush to go back to international capital markets. Our expectation is that in managing our expenditure and increasing our revenue, we'll have the resources to it. Working towards the capital market is important because we then get our ratings up and make the country more attractive for foreign investors, especially FDI. But rest assured that no one is rushing to the international capital markets at this juncture.
Ghana is also slated to receive the first $600 million installment of the bailout fund on Friday, May 19, 2023. Here is Finance Minister again.
For the question, as Stefan has mentioned, there's a $600 million release. I'm sure I'll be working with him to see whether we can get it by tomorrow. And then we move on to the next 6 months, which will be another $600 million. And then we have about 5 different tranches every 6 months in the periods forward to get to the $3 billion. With regards to the issue of the negotiations and discussions of commercial and external creditors, we really are, at the beginning of that discussion, and therefore cannot really be specific about what haircuts or how that will end. But so far, discussions have been very cordial, and we hope that with the signals given by the fund, we'll also have an accommodation that will suit all parties.
On the part of the IMF, the approved program is one that is resilient and fosters inclusive economic growth. Stefan Uday is IMF Mission Chief for Ghana.
Just to give you a few examples, the 2023 budget and the associated revenue reforms were very important first steps towards putting public finances back on a sustainable track. To restore debt sustainability, the government has launched a comprehensive debt restructuring. And the Bank of Ghana has also taken decisive steps to control inflation, and these efforts are already paying off. These are all essential ingredients to address the current challenges and to boost Ghana's prospects going forward. Of course, help from the international community is also needed, and the IMF is playing its part. The $3 billion extended credit facility approved by our board yesterday will support the government's efforts to address this crisis and build the foundations for a better and more inclusive future for all Ghanaians. It will also help ease financing constraints, including by unlocking more funding from the rest of the international community. Ghana's economic program has 3 key objectives. The first one is to restore macroeconomic stability. The second one is to ensure that debt is put on a sustainable path. And the third one is to lay the foundations for stronger and more inclusive growth. To reach these objectives, several policy priorities have been laid out by the government. Look, the first thing I would like to emphasize is that, of course, this program is very much focused on restoring macroeconomic stability, anchoring debt sustainability, and it will also create the foundations for higher and more inclusive growth. So I think that's very important because this will set the stage for a much brighter future for all Ghanaians. But now to your question about the future, I think it's important to emphasize also that this is a program that is very rich in its structural component. It includes many reforms that cover a large range of sectors, and these reforms will make the economy more resilient to shocks in the future. And this is what the government and the IMF are looking for in this program. It's a program that will make the economy more resilient and more likely to withstand shocks in the future.
Governor of the Bank of Ghana, Dr. Ernest Addison, remains hopeful that economic indicators will see some improvement once the account of the central bank is credited.
The issue is about resilience, and this is really what I tried to explain in my earlier intervention, that as at the end of 2021, inflation was at 12.6, and within a year it rose to 54.6 because we had a major challenge with access to financing, especially. And as Stefan said, a major part of this program is focused on fiscal consolidation. As you're aware, there are new revenue measures which would enhance revenue flows to the budget and therefore reduce the demand for financing. You've also had the implementation of the debt exchange program. So the foreign exchange outflows that are associated with debt service should reduce. And then the catalytic impact of the IMF flows, which would, also help attract other foreign inflows, both direct and bilateral support. And all of that should help, in a sense, not only bring inflation down, but also help with exchange rate stability.
All right, so that was a report by City News' Neil Latte on the matters at the IMF, that joint press conference addressed by Finance Minister Ghana, Bank of Ghana boss, and some IMF officials. Also, some stakeholders back home in the business space, including the Ghana Union of Traders and Association of Ghana Industries, have been sharing their views on the IMF approval and their expectations of government.
The concerns by the business community come as government has received the expected amount of $600 million from the International Monetary Fund. Today, this will be the first tranche of the $3 billion three-year extended credit facility Ghana secured from the IMF following the approval on Wednesday to help revive the country's ailing economy. In an interview, City News, President of the Ghana Union of Traders Associations, GUTA, Dr. Joseph Obeng, said the business community is expecting government to ease the burden on them through the removal of new taxes on businesses.
Businesses are suffering because of over-taxation, and that over-taxation impedes growth of businesses. Probably government is adopting these taxes because of the problem that we are having as a nation. But we believe that government understands our cry and our pleas. The fact that taxation is killing us, the nuisance taxes are coming back, are creeping back in folds and in other forms, and new taxes are being added up. And not only trading, the manufacturing sector, the agri sector, all of us. There's no tax that have been introduced that have seen this resistance from all trade business associations like this before, because it affects all segments of businesses. And that's why for government to have gone on means that they have no option left. But we thought that we could have talked through, that we could have gotten an alternative ways, more workable ways, even more than this. Because what do you achieve if after getting the IMF, businesses are collapsed? as is very imminent.
The Association of Ghana Industries has also been reacting to the announcement. Chonam Akpelo is the Greater Accra Regional Chairman of the AGI.
The only thing that is exciting for us is that, number one, it helps to stabilize the economy and bring some sort of fiscal discipline that has been lacking for some time. Our prayer is that the dancing of the cedi to the dollar will come to an end at a point where we have a stabilized forex regime that allows for stability of the cedi. Some of the conditionalities are not in favor of private sector. For example, all of these taxes that have to be introduced as a result of the IMF program, these taxes are too high. You talk about the sustainability and the growth levy of 5%, up to 5% before tax. You see, so what it means is that it is deemed that businesses will always make profit, and they are going to take that of them, and this is frustrating.
For economist Courage Boti, he believes the IMF's supervisory role over government will ensure it does the right thing this time around.
Remember, the last program gave us just about 980 or so billion. This one, $1 million actually dollars. This one is giving us more than 2 times that. In fact, 3 times, even more than 3 times that, really. So it tells you that the size of adjustments required under this program is actually a big reason why we are getting that much. And by implication, the stakes are also very high. You go through the technical notes and really you see that there are very serious adjustments that need to be done within the period to try to achieve the fiscal target set. For instance, the revenue interventions for 2023 alone, the VAT increase, the 3 revenue bills that were passed, and things related, is actually supposed to bring about some 1% additional revenue, 1% of GDP in additional revenue, which is about 8+ billion anticipated in this year alone. And I'm sure that mid-year review and the periods coming would see other interventions like that. And the expenditure side, you expect stricter controls, because the disbursement of the rest of the funds depends on your performance, really. And we are not getting the second tranche in November or December if we do not pass the first review. And so for those reasons, I believe government will stay disciplined in the use of the funds, and whichever other funds that will come during this program, at least in these very early days of the program.
Well, so that was some reactions from some market players on the IMF deal and what their expectations are. This is the big issue, 97.3 City FM. My guests for this morning, Franklin Cudjoe, President, Imani Africa, Joe Jackson, Director of Business Operations at Dalex Finance, Dr. Tia Abdul Kabir Mahama, Technical Advisor, Office of the Vice President, Dr. Patrick Isumi, Economist, University of Ghana, and Ibrahim Mutala Mohammed, Member of Parliament, NDC, Tamale Central. Gentlemen, you're welcome to the program. Joe, let me start off with you. We were here a couple of weeks ago, and in fact, we've spoken, in between, and you were of the view that, if Ghana did not get a deal around this time, May, June, then, we will be headed for some major trouble. And so you pinned it down on grace, I recall. Now, here we are, we have the program, some $600 million hitting our account. Generally, we should be out of that danger zone, at least for now.
Oh, we are. We are there. The key statistic that we were quoting then was that we're down to less than a month of our reserves. Now, the danger there was that anything goes wrong and we can't fund our foreign exchange purchases. So the danger we're quoting was that we ran out of forex, we can't fund fuel for our generators, we can't fund fuel for our vehicles and the like, and so we're looking at anything from doom sort to queues, and maybe even worse, drugs, shortages, etc. So we've definitely withdrawn back from that precipice. And if you look at the IMF document there's a graph there that is stark, right, about our foreign exchange reserves and how low they had fallen. So that was really the biggest danger that we'll run out of forex. So my primary emotion when the announcement was made was of relief that we had averted the danger involved. But my secondary emotion was of the hard work starts. Was about anxiety about the belt tightening and the hard work that would lie ahead of us, not just as individuals but as corporates, right? And I know that there is a certain mode of celebration. Whilst the relief is important that we've drawn back from the brink, I think people should just tone down their expectations. It's not like 600 million has come to your bank account for you to take and blow, as they say, or chop. No, we're nowhere near that. It's 600 million that will primarily go up to show off our reserves. The biggest impact there is that the CD should stabilize or even appreciate. And that, of course, has ramifications for the whole country. Businesses, individuals, the cost of fuel, right? And transportation. So that is a good thing. It's a good thing that our reserves have been shored up, that we've got the IMF's blessing. It's a good thing. It will definitely, the first effect you're going to feel is in the CD. But there are a lot of issues that we have to look ahead on the belt tightening and the effect, first and foremost on our public sector, and then on our businesses.
I see. So you mentioned belt tightening. Looking at this program, what are those belt tightening measures, and how do you think that government will be able to carry the people along? What are some of those belt tightening measures that we will be looking at?
Well, the first of all is that when you look at remember this program talks about expenditure rationalization. And one of the key areas they've talked about is on the energy sector, that we've got to cut down on outstanding and bills in the energy sector. So you're going to see these quarterly increases in
PUR, I mean the PURC utilities.
Utilities, you're going to see it in electricity, you're going to see it continue. And if there are any changes in prices it hits us directly. In international market, it will hit us directly. That we can take for granted over the period of this program. So all of us should start factoring in increases in energy costs. That's very important. But there's a huge part in that document about one, reducing capital expenditure, which means that over the course of this program, you're not going to get as many all those fancy roads and hospitals and the like that we tend to associate with government largesse. It's not going to happen. We've limited capital expenditure, right? And they talk about reprioritization and lowering it down to no more than 0.9% of our GDP, right? The other thing is this: in the government sector, on the labor front, the freeze is going to continue, right? Because you're going to, first of all, you're going to limit hiring, and you're going to limit wage increases. Now, in a period where wage increases, inflation is still walking in excess of 40%, albeit coming down, it means that your wages in the public sector are not going to catch up with inflation. and they're limiting wage increases and hiring, right, to 0.5% of GDP. Yes.
I see.
So there's going to be negligible employment, if anything at all, and most important, there's going to be negligible increments in the salaries. And as for the taxes,
you come plenty.
They'll come plenty. Because one key thing has been that the program talks about the governments or the managers focusing on revenue enhancement, even more than expenditure rationalization. Now, that sounds like fancy English, but all it means is that your taxes are going to go up even more than your expenditure is going to come down.
I see. Interesting. And so it means really that we have to brace ourselves up.
Oh, you have to brace yourselves. You have to brace. It's not going to be a party. Far from that. It's going to be a lot worse.
I'm not sure we will do a kinky party anytime soon at the finance ministry, as we saw a couple of years ago.
Next time it should be a Gobe party.
Let me come to Dr. Patrick Esuming of the University of Ghana. I mean, the deal by and large has been clinched. That certainly should make some of you in academia who were very concerned about the situation quite happy that at least Ghana has been put on some relative stable grounds whilst we fight ahead what's in the future.
Good morning again, and good morning to my co-panelists. So I think it's definitely great that finally we have the approval. The economy had been teetering on the brink of disaster for a while. And I think the delays, and especially the way today, we hear that we are getting and we are not getting, especially from the official communication side from the government of Ghana, wasn't helpful. So it's good that we finally get the program. I think that, when you study the program document, you definitely come to the same conclusion that Mr. Joe Jackson has just come to, and that is that, it's really the start of the difficult journey rather than an end to our problems. We've said that we've been to the IMF. This is our 17th time. It seems to me that this particular program is the one that will impose probably the heftiest hardship on Ghanaians. If you look at even the prior actions we have had to take in order to get here, you can already tell. So we can start with the domestic debt exchange. And when you read the document, even though it had been coming, when the bank started reporting their financials, it had been coming, what the domestic debt exchange has done to them. But when you start reading the document itself, you see what a heavy price the banking system have had to pay, coming on the back of the financial sector cleanup, which bill we have not even finished paying. So I think that is really the starting point. What you hope is that, if we are paying this kind of hefty price by way of what the domestic debt exchange has done and the new taxes that we are going to pay, the extra revenue measures that we are going to pay, and let's be clear, we know how the government has decided to distribute the cost of going to this program. And they have decided to, load more heavily in terms of the fiscal consolidation. They are loading more heavily on the revenue side. That means that individual Ghanaians and businesses are really going to pay a huge chunk outside of what we have already done. But the broader point I want to make is that it will be a real travesty if, we don't take advantage of such a heavy economic crisis and paying such a heavy price to make fundamental structural changes that will ensure that we stay away from this trouble for a long time at the very minimum. Because, you know, if you look at the problems and the layers of the problems we have, so at the moment our macroeconomy is in deep trouble. But you see, that macroeconomy, that trouble builds on the deficiencies in government finances, the structural problems of our public finances. That underneath that is a weak, fundamentally weak structure of the real side of the economy. So the way these things are being resolved is that we are trying to first stabilize the macroeconomic side and then build medium-term structural changes to public finances. So you hope that it won't stop there, because mostly when we've gone to the IMF, that's where it stops. So we'll be able to make some changes to how public finances work, usually not deep. But in terms of building on whatever macroeconomic stability we will get to change how our economy runs, the difficult economy, what people call the Gadgetsburg economy that we've complained about since I've been an adult, that we've drawn all manner of programs to try and address, but we have never get to it. I think this particular program, because of the gravity of the crisis we are in, and also the extent of the sacrifices Ghanaians have to make, we better hope that this time is different. And this time we follow through all the action that is required. And for once, we walk the talk of changing how our economy runs, both fiscally as well as structurally on the real side. So that is my preliminary comment. I think even the, you know, so the immediate thing the immediate gain Ghanaians might see is the currency gaining, and with some luck, that translating into some reduction in prices, especially fuel and then our imported items. But that may not happen. I think, you know, the city is stabilizing, but it's translating into lower prices may not happen, because to get here, we have had to take extraordinary measures. You know, the recent taxes that were imposed. So even though you might get some relief from the side of the current stability of the stability of the currency, you know, the new taxes are now yet to kick in. So those new taxes could actually offset some of the immediate gains in terms of the currency stability that we will get, in terms of how Ghanaians are facing prices. So I think it's absolutely important that we are in no doubt about what we are getting ourselves into, and not think that, you know, it's time to celebrate because our problems are over. No. The depth and the breadth and the magnitude of the reforms that are required in the program document, not just limited to public finances, but even the Bank of Ghana. The changes in the Bank of Ghana law, the restrictions that we are going to put, you know, it really tells you that the work is now about to start, and the difficulty is now about to intensify before maybe sometime next year or so, we must begin to see some benefits.
So the work is now about to start, you say. Can we stay committed to it? Can we stay committed? I mean, no matter what happens in the local economy, etc. Given that we've had, you know, very tough measures. You describe this as the heftiest hardships that will befall us, etc. Given all of that, can we stay committed to this program and drive it to its conclusion?
So we used to think that when the IMF is in town, they will be successful in whipping everybody into line. But if you look at especially the last program that we went into, and some of the things that we put in the program document, that for whatever reason we were in a hurry to exit. Therefore, a lot of the things that we had agreed we didn't do. And that, for me, that gives me worry that we will stay committed to the cause. I think what usually happens is that, especially the initial years, the first 12 months to 18 months, you really do see the government staying committed. Then, especially when elections come somewhere in the middle, I've said before that our governments have learned how to dribble the IMF. So we might have this program document going on and on. Don't forget that we were in the IMF program in 2016, and we didn't stay the course when the election came. So, you want to believe that the IMF, ordinarily we should stay the course, but I think it will require a bit more from Ghanaians and, following and more or less pushing our government in view of the sacrifices we are going to make. Because let's face it, even though the expenditure measures, I mean, it's first of all, when our government said that last year, and this is in the document, when our government, at the beginning when they were bringing the e-levy, and then Ghanaians were trying to push back and say the government should do something about its expenditure measures. And the government promised that there's going to be about 30 or 20% cut across board. The program document says, somewhere on page 7 or so, that the government didn't follow through to that. So clearly, Ghanaians who are going to bear the bulk of the pain have to be a little bit more demanding that the reforms that are going to take are not just to tick IMF boxes, but these are reforms that will bring fundamental improvement in how our economy works. So I think a lot will depend on how Ghanaians are engaged in the process. And I think part of the document has explained the need for the government to be more engaged. Because let's face it, we had a guess of what might be in the document, but I don't think there was any broad-based consensus on what this program was. Because if there was that broad-based consensus, I don't think everything would have been heavily biased towards raising revenue increment the way we see in the current document. But we are here. This is what we have already signed on to. So it behoves on Ghanaians to be a little bit more forceful and a little bit more demanding in terms of how governments behave going forward whilst we are in this IMF program.
I see. So I'll come back to you, Dr. Sumi. Franklin, what I hear around the table is that we shouldn't be celebrating, we shouldn't be jubilating. But I mean, there's a need to be grateful for little mercies or small mercies and celebrate. Of course, this we understand is a record time we've had the program. July, and then in May we have a program. I mean, staff level agreement reached sometime in December, which we understand was quite unprecedented as well. We should be happy while we roll up our sleeves to get a hard job done, shouldn't we?
Well, good morning to you and my friends again. Well, look, we were characteristically in a war situation, right? And in a war situation, we were heavily wounded, we were bleeding, and somehow we needed morphine in order to stabilize the bleeding before we are then carefully, if you like, examined. So what has happened essentially with this 600 million, clinching the deal, and probably with the first tranche landing almost immediately, is the morphine stage, right? We now have to come and examine exactly the nature, the extent of the wound, and then, as it were, plaster it all over again. Well, so I can understand that we need to be joyous, especially because, at least if we translate it into what it means globally for Ghana, it starts building that confidence that is required albeit it is externally sourced. In this case, the policy credibility has been externalized, and that is what the international community will be happy about. We certainly in Ghana should obviously be happy about. I mean, who was it that was asking a question, I think 3 days ago? It was one of my principals actually asking questions as to actually complaining that we have externalized our banking sector control to the IMF. And I asked, why not? Because for several decades, you have not even respected your own rules that you set about. When you don't respect the least of it, which is zero financing of the government budget, then at some point, if you are going to ask money from someone who is keenly interested in not just you repaying, but ensuring that at least they can also check boxes and say, when they intervene in this country, there was some success story. And they've been doing this over and over again. At some point, something ought to give. And this is where they would then require that there's some sort of an overseer who sits even at your central bank to monitor exactly what you do. I hope that in itself may yield some results. But having come full circle to the deal, I also noticed that I mean, don't forget there are still significant concerns regarding the relief that we need to be seeking from external creditors. Now that they have agreed, the real work now begins to ensure that they need to also come on board and at least ensure that we are getting a relief of about $2.6 billion annually, which in total by 2016 should be about $10.4 billion US. Question is, are we going to get that? Is it likely that we are going to cross that bar? Because that is significant and is impactful and is going to impact on the currency. And the comparator example here is, as my good friend Dr. Tio put out, is Zambia, where Zambia got a deal after 38 or so months. Zambia got a deal from the IMF, and immediately the kwacha started appreciating against the dollar. But because the external creditor engagement, that relief that they wanted, delayed significantly, it affected the fortunes of the kwacha. And as we speak, the kwacha is in some sort of turmoil. So if you are not able to tame these relief package, which we need with our external creditors, then there's going to be some problem along the way. It may erode all the gains we'll be making, even as the CD seems to be appreciating. There are some hard rules there. There are some hard facts as well. And I think Dr. Sumin and Professor Sumin and my good friend Joe have mentioned that as well. You need to be able to raise at least 3% equivalent of GDP in terms of the revenues, right? Question is, are we likely to scale that bar? While at the same time, you're supposed to reduce expenditure by that almost the same percentage of GDP by 2026. Question is, with elections lurking around the corner, are we really sure that this government will be interested or would respect the whole idea of reducing this expenditure? In any case, if you don't get the revenues, in this case, maybe something will happen, because if they are not going to get the revenues as they wish, and the external creditor, relief package may not come in time, then they may not have money to spend. But we know our governments are miraculous and they miracle workers. They could reorder the expenditure in such a way that they'll spend heavily, front load it during the elections. And then we go back to what Professor Sumin talks about again, this cyclical nonsense of trying to build a democracy on a razor-thin belief in what we call, should I call it, transparency. It's become a very discordant, and if you like, as has been used, a very sloganeering type of situation or economy of politics that we have. We do not want any of these going forward, which is why when Professor Sumin talks about we being engaged, as the citizens getting engaged, and probably the citizens this time around getting more serious about the terms of this deal, is important, because as Professor Sumin rightly suggests, the last IMF deal, we jumped off immediately when we made certain promises, which were were not only fantastic, but actually fantastically unachievable, right? Like getting almost 1 million barrels of oil a day, and then public sector reform that never happened, and some other deals with these Chinese bauxite deals that were not properly thought through. So a lot, and the public sector reform that also never occurred. Strangely, this public sector reform agenda, and then the whole idea of public financial management, as state enterprises, fiscal rates that ought to be checked, and indeed the tax reforms, and especially governance reforms, seem to be back on the table again, which means that these are unleft business that we should have attended to in the last deal. And that's why I faulted the IMF the last time when in 2019, this government presented a much rosier picture about what prospects they thought they were, and they allowed them to jump off the IMF deal immediately. Of course, I could understand that we were a proud people, a very pride-driven set of people who especially was being led by people who believe in Ghana beyond aid, and all of those things that are quite fantastically, if you like phantasmagoria. I'm sorry, I'm using big words this morning, but just to the extent
it tells of your excitement, about the deal.
Strange. Yeah, so it's about that illusory prospect of nirvana that never really happens in the typical African economy of democracy, which often immediately there's an injection of funds, starts behaving like an Arabian prince, when in actual fact they are just a slave of another kingdom. So we need to start that engagement process, and as Professor Sumi rightly said, there's a lot in the IMF document which government revealed to them rather than probably accepting to us. All the things about the challenges even before COVID hit, they accepted that in the document, because the IMF did point that out clearly, that there were already challenges against the popular narrative that Ukraine and Russia and COVID did not have an impact. So I think, clearly speaking, we need to be a bit more focused on this deal. Everybody should be interested in making sure that the tenets of this deal are respected. It's a tall order, and I struggle to see how the government is going to meet all those conditionality before the next tranche. But you never know. Anything could happen.
Very well. So, I mean, of course, there will be hardship. Public sector wage will not increase beyond a certain very small figure, from the IMF document and all of that. And there'll be quarterly tariff adjustments, including electricity and water, clearly pointing to, difficult times ahead. Technical advisor to the Office of the Vice President is here. So, I want to find out from you what the sentiment from the corridors of power were when we finally heard on Wednesday. Of course, you might have had prior knowledge that the deal is gone through. So that would be your first question. We will come back after a break, and then you take us through what government exactly or actually signed up for, what government is agreed with the IMF to do. But first of all, what were the impressions in government that this deal, indeed, on Wednesday went through, and as of yesterday, we understand some money hit our accounts?
All right, thank you very much, Salom. And then let me also say good morning to other panelists on the show, Mr. Frank Lukujo, and then the Professor, and then Mr. Jackson. On the issue of IMF, I think that when we started somewhere May, June, with the announcement by government to go to the IMF, there were a lot of cynics. There were a lot of people who thought that it was practically impossible for Ghana to secure a funded program with the IMF. We've had this discussion for a long time, in fact, for almost a year running. We've come back to the same table. On this show, we've discussed the possibility, the need, why we needed to have the program. At the end of the day, Ghana has succeeded in getting the program. And then IMF board on Wednesday approved a funded program. For us as a government and for the president, what basically it meant for the government is that, look, we are on a path to ensuring economic recovery. We are on a path to lessening the burden that the Ghanaian people has been faced with. We are on a path to ensuring that we restore macroeconomic stability, and we are on a path to ensure that we protect the vulnerable in society in the context of social spending. So it is something that is a welcoming news, because if the program was so central to our whole management of the economy, the program was so central to bringing our debt back to more sustainable level, the program was so crucial for us to be able to honor our obligation when they fall due, to be able to meet basic services, to be able to make sure that businesses are on back to their, on a solid ground for their operation. And to achieve such a height is actually something commendable. Look, people would think that government would celebrate over the program. We would celebrate, but with caution, because this is not, as we all lament, we all state here, it's money that is supposed to be based on performance criteria. Even though the first $600 million has hit our account, the prospect, our ability to get another $600 million in the next review session ending July, that will come in November, is supposed to be based on a number of performance criteria that government is supposed to meet. Aside these performance criteria, we are supposed to also have some structural reforms, or they call them structural benchmarks. This is all part of the work left to be done, and government is more focused on the work to be done. At the end of the day, it's a 3-year program, a 36-month program. And our expectation is that within this 36-month period, we should be able to bring back our debt as per the program objective to a more moderate risk of debt, distress from this high risk of debt distress we're facing. Franco Kudjo mentioned rightly that the program period we are supposed to have some relief of about 10.4 billion. Admittedly, we are expecting a balance of payment support for the 3 years running 2023 to 2026 of about 15 billion. So the farm program is only a 30% of the whole funding balance of payment support that is required. So how we would be able to get the bilateral, which is ongoing, because the Ghana Official Creditors Committee was recently formed with the participation of the Paris Club and China. So that bilateral arrangement is ongoing. Multilateral arrangement, discussions are also ongoing. And by multilateral, IMF, World Bank, and AFDB funds or support programs are all part of it. We also have the commercial. Okay, the commercial loans is the most crucial. But look, government is, what I just need to stay for now is the government knows that there's a lot of work to be done. We need to stay focused on the program. It's not the mere fact that some 600 million has hit our account so that we should start celebrating.
Very well. So government knows that there's a lot of work to be done. The $600 million shouldn't necessarily make us happy too much, because there's a lot of work to be done. Hold your thoughts there. I'll take a short break. I'll come back, give you enough time to deal with the matters, including taking us through what government is signed on to, and also taking us through those performance criteria and the structural benchmarks you mentioned before we get the next tranche in November. This is the big issue on 97.3 CTFM. We'll take a short break and return and deal with the very critical matters that we've outlined. We'll be right back. Welcome back to The Big Issue. Thanks so much for joining the program. Today, we're looking at two key issues. We're looking at the approval of Ghana's IMF deal. We're asking whether it's a beginning of the end of the country's economic woes. Some $600 million hit our accounts yesterday. It's a 36-month program, and Ghana is expecting to get some $3 billion from the IMF. The discussion so far has been that there's a lot of hard work ahead. It is not time to necessarily celebrate because, I mean, there's a lot of tightening ahead to do. Also, we'll be looking at the NDC primary, John Mohammed's victory, and the NDC campaign. He's been saying quite a number of things, restoring some of the licenses of, the banks which were closed down, and also size of government, a few other things. We'll look at all of that. The fact that some key MPs also lost their primaries, which means they're not returning to Parliament. We'll look at all of that. My guest this morning, Franklin Cudjoe, President of Imani Africa, Joe Jackson, Director of Business Operations, Dalex Finance, Dr. Tia Abdul Kabiru Mahama, Technical Advice Office of the Vice President, Dr. Patrick Isumin, Economist, University of Ghana, and Ibrahim Murtala Mohammed, MP for Tamale Central. So Dr. Kabiru Mahama was on the floor dealing with issues of the hard work which is ahead, the fact that there should be some performance criteria that Ghana should meet before the next tranche of $600 million is released sometime in November. And he mentioned structural benchmarks. He will take us through what exactly government is signed on to, government is committed to be doing with the IMF, so we know exactly what to expect. Dr. Kabiru.
So, before, maybe for the benefits of our viewers, let me just start off by saying that this whole program started with the appraiser by the IMF staff when we invited them, when government expressed interest. And in that appraisal, they noted one major issue as the first and foremost, that we are facing an external shock coupled with pre-existing vulnerabilities. And I think that I'm starting on this note because on this same platform, the initial comment, people have noted that Ghana was, the government was failing to admit that there were some underlying issues or there were problems with the economy. And when you read the document very carefully and you listen to the choice of words, you would agree with us that, look, what is the nature of the existing vulnerability? If your economy is still import dependent, it's pre-existing vulnerability. It's not a suggestion that most of your macroeconomic indicators are moving south. Okay, so that was the first thing they noted. They also mentioned that we needed to recalibrate because when we identify the problem, we need to recalibrate our macroeconomic policy, and that was so crucial for us to do. And the IMF staff also, again, noted that we need to front-load most fiscal adjustment program. And in fact, as we'll come to discuss, the need to front-load the fiscal adjustment was part of the prior actions that needed to be taken for us to qualify for a program. And then there was the need for structural fiscal adjustment or fiscal reforms, where we need to look at our tax mobilization effort to raise our domestic tax generation to debt servicing. There was also the need for debt restructuring after they had done the debt sustainability analysis. So the IMF staff concluded with this. So Ghana needed to meet the prior actions before we can even ask for the board's approval of the fund. What were some of the prior actions? One, we needed to make sure that our utility tariffs are closer to full cost recovery. It was on the back of that PERC had to increase electricity tariffs cumulatively by about 30%. One of the prior actions that government needed to meet was to hold on the central bank monetary financing of the budget. Okay, as part of the rules, IMF, central government had to sign an MOU with the central bank to ensure that central bank financing of the budget, that is the monetary financing, was put on hold. That was another prior, action that needed to be taken. Another prior action was what they call a legislation or an executive instrument that specified the fiscal adjustment that needed to be done, and this was contained in the 2023 budget. And of course, the 2023 budget indicated that we needed to do a debt, operation. Okay, these are part of the 5 major prior actions that government needed to take. And all the 5 prior actions, one of it was also the financing assurance, okay, from the bilateral. So you realize that immediately we had the financial assurance from the bilateral partners. The IMF board quickly issued a statement. They went ahead and started on, as the board meeting and approved the program. Now, the fund, of course, in May, after we had concluded on this particular major in May 2023, the governor together with the minister then sent the letter of intent. The letter of intent is the formal request that we needed a farm program. And after we have done so A, B, C, D, Ghana is now in a good position to seek the IMF board approval of a farm program.
So that letter of intent
went in May.
In May, just
this month.
Okay, so that's after we think we've cleared all the
prior actions. Okay, this letter came or went with what they call the macro, or what they call the economic policy, financial and economic policy, economic and financial policy program of the Memorandum of Economic and Financial Policy. Okay, that was the document that accompanied it. This is what sometimes we Christian in our local dynamics at the PCPEC. That's the post-COVID program of economic growth. Okay, together with that document was what we call the MTU. The MTU is the technical memorandum of understanding, which then spells out the nitty-gritties, the definitional elements, what are the numbers, what are the performance indicators we need to measure ourselves. So these three documents went to the IMF board. IMF board, after having looked at this particular document, having looked at the, and let me even digress a bit to state that when we were preparing this Memorandum of Economic and Financial Policy, a lot of discussion was had about it. Many people thought that it was shrouded in secrecy. Many people thought the government was not engaging them. And I even remember, if my memory serves me right, Mr. Frank Okudjo was one of the lead critics of how government has carried on with this whole program and was advocating for the century style of approach. All these criticisms were taken on board, and the review and the feedback from academia, feedback from industry players were all factored into this particular program. Then that was submitted to the IMF board for consideration. IMF board did not labor, they didn't labor to look at this document because they have engaged the Ghanaian authority. The mission was in Ghana. Mr. Rodet and his team were in Ghana. Okay, they look at the books of governance, they went through the books, and they realized that Ghana was ripe, Ghana was in a good position. But one important thing we need to note, the IMF will never give you a funded program under the back of their new guidelines if you don't have the financing assurance. The financial assurance is basically to the effect that, look, you must give, your creditors must give prior commitment that they will give you debt relief. Because it's a fully funded program. And a fully funded program means that they don't want, within the course of the program, for them to be program slippages. Okay? They don't want within the program, even when you finish, your ability to repay them is problematic. These were the measures the IMF or the conditions the IMF were looking for in order to satisfy themselves to give us a program. Now, Ghana has made those particular programs. The central bank, the Bank of Ghana, the central government and the Minister for Finance have all shown commitment, and we've met this criteria. Now, when you look at table 1, it has outlined of the program of 126-page document. You realize it has outlined the access phasing out of that particular program. For instance, we have had the board's approval. We have received $600 million. Okay. The next expectation is that we will we would receive the next fund sometime in November. But this is contingent on a number of issues. Because table 2 of the Memorandum of Economic and Financial Policy spells out the performance criteria. The performance criteria are basically one on international reserves. How do we cumulatively replenish our depleted reserves? That is on the back of central government financing. Of course, we will come to discuss that as part of the program. The central bank is expected to, do what we call flexible exchange regime, where they don't need to intervene in the forex market, only to the extent that they want to smoothen the distortion in the forex market. They will not be required to intervene. So the international reserve criteria or performance criteria is one of the things we need to look at. Central bank claims on central government. So that is how much of our Ghana ability, how much of the central bank money has been repaid over the period of the program, of a 6-month period that we're going to have. It's one of the performance criteria we'll look at. We also look at the debt instrument. Debt instrument in the sense that central government is not only the ministry and its allied institutions. We have department like Cocoa Board. We have department like GMPC. All these parastatal or state-owned enterprises also acquired loans. They also go into the financial market to take debt instruments. These are all part of the debt stock of government. So the expectation of the program is that within the 6 months of the program, we will have to monitor how much of the loans have been acquired by these state-owned enterprises to the extent that the amount should not exceed a certain threshold, and they put it in the program. If you just indulge me, I'll read that part. Table 2. Table 2 on performance criteria
on page what?
On page. It is on page 73 of the program.
Okay.
Okay. It indicates Ghana performance criteria and indicative targets under the extended credit facility, 2020-2024. So we are just talking about the review period, because the next is November, and then before not the whole program. The first one is net international reserve of the Bank of Ghana. It's one of the performance criteria, and for that we are looking at performance criteria proposed is 98 in USA dollar terms million. We also have Bank of Ghana claims on central government and public entities cumulatively change ceiling. So in billions of cedis, we are looking at 0. Okay. Then we also look at the present value of newly contracted or guaranteed external debt by central government. We are looking at maybe 66.2 million USA dollar. So these are some of the performance criteria. Benchmarks being put. Limitation thresholds being put on government not to exceed these numbers. So there are about 7 performance criteria that are supposed to be met. And we also have monetary and policy consultation clauses. Okay, here basically we are looking at the 12-month consumer price index. So the whole program is supposed to bring inflation back to plus or minus 2, inflation rate of 8%, right? That's the program. The inflation band.
That's what we should achieve in the 36 months.
Within the program period. That is within the program period. But for the purpose of this, for the purpose of 12 months, we are looking at having an inflation of 48. By June, we should have inflation of 48.1%. If you look at that page, you will see that for June and for September, we are looking at 45.6. So that is a progressively reducing the inflation rate or inflation target. So we have the outer band and the inner band of inflation target. We also have central bank target rate. That's the inner and then the outer band. So we also have indicative targets, which are about revenue measures. So this table clearly states what government needs to do. Okay, and that's what I'm saying. There is no work as usual. Government has to achieve some of these targets in order to allow us access the program. But I also mentioned about some structural conditionalities under the program, and that has been stated in table 3 of the program. If we just go to page 74 of that IMF document. So again, some of the structural actions that we need to enact. And some of these structural actions were prior actions. Okay, prior action in the sense that the first one has already been met. So when you look at the structural conditionalities that are supposed to be met, some of them are prior actions. And I can tell you that there were 5 prior actions, some of which I mentioned already in the program. One of it was that we will need to have legislation or an executive instrument that highlights the government program on fiscal consolidation, or the fiscal objective of government. Okay, the 2023 budget serves this purpose. And let me read, and it's important to read this. They say the prior action, an adjustment of non-oil primary balances measured on the commitment basis of at least 2% of GDP, with revenue measure that will permanently improve the non-oil revenue to GDP ratio of at least 1% of GDP. So the IMF needed a structural commitment, a structural document, or a structural policy in the form of a legislation of an executive instrument that commits government to ensuring that we improve our revenue, and especially non-oil revenue, improvement or mobilization. So if you look at it, that prior action has been achieved in the 2023 budget, and also the measures that were mentioned in that particular budget, including the domestic debt exchange program. Now we also have the second structural conditionality that is supposed to be implemented. Implement an upfront weighted average electricity tariff adjustment of at least 29%. It is on the back of this that the whole essence of this condition is to ensure that, look, we have near or close to full cost recovery in the because the shortfalls in the energy sector is one of the burdens that government is battling with. Shortfalls, especially in the energy sector. So the IMF will be concerned that we don't want to have a program that will be derailed by payments in the energy sector, because if you don't have full recovery, it is certainly going to be problematic. This is why this conditionality is there, or this particular structural condition is necessary. There's also issue about earmark fund. You realize that even in the Memorandum of Economic and Financial Policy, the government has indicated that the earmark fund has been lowered from 25% to 17.5%. That has freed some capital, or that has freed some money for, servicing of obligations. Okay, the lowering of the earmark fund was one of the things government had already committed to do, and government has noted that government has committed itself to doing. And let me mention that ensure that GET Fund, Road Fund, and DACF start reporting provisional spending budget within the gift mix. Okay, one of the problems we are having, the gift mix came in to control or rationalize expenditure, to ensure that every expenditure of MMDAs or every expenditure of government or central government is reported within the gift mix. But over time, most of the expenditure have not been reported within gift mix. The IMF is insistent, and Ghana committed, because this is part of our MEFP. That's the Memorandum of Economic and Financial Policy.
But should it take, I hear you and all the technical things you're saying. And for many people, breaking all of that down means that there'll be a lot of hardship. Talking about the tariffs, PRC tariffs, for example, now it's almost a quarterly, automatic adjustment. That in the last couple of months, we've had a cumulative increase of, close to 75%, and incomes have not increased that much. That is a big deal. The IMF also mentions that there should be the removal of the value-added tax exemptions. This we've known many years ago. Reducing customs exemptions, increasing progressivity in personal income taxes. Income taxes will be going up, which means that the average person or the final person will have to be losing more money. Government can only employ only 0.5% of the current labor force, etc. This is a tightening on personal finances, personal economies, etc. But we knew that we were to do a lot of these things, raising tax to GDP ratio to about 18% from where we are. Kenneth Furata has always been talking about that. But it appeared the commitment today wasn't there. Now, did they have to take the IMF to get us to do these things which we knew were to do already? There's the tax exemption bill also. I don't know if it's been passed already. We knew how to do all of those things. But the political will to do them were not there. Now we have the IMF with a stick behind our back. Now we are rushing to do this in a very short space of time, when we had forever to do it, to ease the burden over a period of time on Ghanaians. Now, quarterly adjustments, salaries haven't increased, but tariffs will be increasing, etc. Didn't we know all these? And did we have to get to a place where we will now be front-loading everything, and then people will be suffering? That really is what baffles my mind.
Yeah, Salom, you see, the fact is that most of this government was doing them. Most of them. For instance, government had started discussion on property rates way before the IMF program was.
Yeah, but it was not really progressive.
I'm coming.
We started this.
We've started. Government has always been reluctant on the issue of increasing the ban on personal income because of the effect it has on the disposable income of the worker. Okay, that reluctance has always been there. But you and I will admit that we cannot devolve this country unless we are committed to paying taxes. The IMF putting this as part of the program, or government submitting this as part of the proposal and being accepted by IMF is also just a testament of the fact that we are in difficult times. Okay, and people must bear with government under this difficult time. That look, without this program, okay, but for this program, if government had just come to say that we are increasing taxes, I'm sure Mr. Joshua, I'm sure Mr. Frank, I'm sure Professor would have all been on the street to say the government is insensitive, times are hard, and government is increasing, taxes on people. Okay, that would have been the default position of Ghanaians.
Yeah, and it's been the default e-levy. We've seen a lot of but government still went ahead. Yeah. Government always finds its way of getting those taxes.
I'm saying that government had to do that because of the necessity because of the necessity of it. Government had to do that because people of good conscience will know that we are in difficult situation, and without this particular condition being met, we cannot have a fund program. So that IMF program is actually coming to aid Ghana to do some of this. It gives Ghana, I mean, the central government, the opportunity, the backing, the rationalization of the measures government is already planning to take. Because the president will not deliberately impose hardship on any Ghanaian. The president will know that to the extent that any measure the president wants to take, the finance minister is proposing, is to ensure that we be able to stabilize our economy, to ensure that businesses are able to thrive, to ensure that we are able to meet our obligation. But look, you mentioned the point that this whole thing is to increase suffering. The IMF is conscious of that. And the IMF, on the back of the program, has even increased cash transfer program, has doubled the payment to this vulnerable in the society.
That's the leap. That's the poorest of the poor.
Apart from the leap, government has also enhanced the amount being paid as capitation grant as part of the program.
For the schools.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Government has also enhanced, and as part of the program, as part of the exemption area, spending on health and education, where training and funding of education and second cycle institution is going to be part and parcel and paramount to that particular program. So there's vulnerable aspect, the social cushion of the program is not in doubt. What we may be talking about is, for instance, he mentioned about employment restriction, and there was some, bit of misinterpretation because he mentioned that capital expenditure is going to be reduced to 0.9% of GDP. That is not what the program conveys. The program is saying that we want to reduce by that amount, reduction or limiting capital expenditure, and the savings from that limitation is going to be about 0.9%, but not capping our capital expenditure to 0.9% of GDP. Okay, that's what the program states about all this. So what we may be limited about, the reduction in expenditure on capital is going to be a problem because we still have a lot of roads to fix, we still have a lot of hospitals to build, we still have a lot of schools to build. That is where probably we may be thinking of hardship.
And the employment, just 0.5% of the current labor force. A lot of nurses picketing every now and then, teachers are home, and a lot of young people leaving the universities, all hoping to get employment and all of that. The private sector is not really expanding because of the difficulties. That will bring a lot of social difficulties to government and even the people. 0.5% of current labor force you can only take. That is serious.
That is certainly a problem, considering even without the program, government ability to employ every graduate is not there. Okay, so on the back of program, that is going to be there. But mind you, this is even a far better program than the program that they say did not employment at all. Okay, we are looking at net attrition. We are looking at 0.5% of the current size. It means that if you take the number of people employed, you take even 0.5%, that's a lot of people that are going to be employed. But note that there is also exemption within the sectors I've mentioned, education and health. Okay, these exemptions need to be highlighted. And when you talk of nurses, you talk of teachers, they are all part of that particular category that the program envisioned. Envisage that, look, we will need to protect this. We will need to make sure that nurses are working. We need to ensure that teachers are teaching. Then the professor mentioned about the financial sector where the program has put some burden. He has failed to understand that page 57 of the IMF whole document. You've
chewed the pages and the document.
When you were speaking, I tried to take some notes. 57 has actually noted that government mentioned about you distorted my thoughts on the back of the particular comment. The program, he mentioned that
but 57.
57. Yeah. If you go to 57, there is on this our government didn't follow up on the 30% reduction. Prof mentioned that, but 57 didn't say that. If you read 57, they will tell that the 30% reduction in salary by the president, by the vice president, is maintained, and the IMF has accepted this as part of the program. So it cannot be the case that we didn't follow up through this particular measure. He mentioned about the financial.
But is it possible to give us, maybe not right now, is it possible to give us a scorecard or a result of a report of a kind on these 30% reductions that over the period of 2 years or since you made this announcement, this is how much has accrued, or this is how much savings we've made from the salary deduction, 30% deduction from from the said persons.
For that specific,
maybe not now, but I think the people of Ghana will be interested to know.
But some of these,
but it's not.
Some of these savings have been stated in the document, except that what is not contained is what you just asked. Some of these savings of some of the measures being taken is contained in that specific page I've just mentioned, the 57 I've mentioned. If you go to page 20 of the document, they mention specifically the impact of the financial sector cleanup. And what is important, and that is what the Ghanaian people need to know, that the financial sector was relatively robust. And the IMF has accepted that assumption, and based on their assessment of the asset quality review of these banks, it was clear that the banking sector was robust prior to this particular debt operation, domestic debt operation. And the IMF has stated that, underscored that under page 20 of the report, when they stated clearly that impact of the financial sector is going to be there on the back of the operation. However, the sector was relatively robust prior to the program. So let us not create the perception that there was a financial sector cleanup, the cost of it was not accounted for, but the stability of the financial sector is something we need to remember.
The financial, you've been on for 30 minutes. Yes. I guess you acknowledge that, so that when I'm you know, so you don't have enough time. The issue about the financial sector really, cleanup really is that people think that closing the banks, for example, wasn't the right way to. We could have dealt with the key people, preserve jobs, etc. But I'll come to you. Joe, you wanted to make a comment on some of the things he said.
Actually, a lot of things have been raised. I couldn't address them.
Well, you are quoting the document, page 20, page 56. I mean, that's quite impressive, though. But yes.
You know, the comment I wanted to make was on the fact that one of the challenges government is going to face is the backlash against taxes. And this has been ever present, and you alluded to it. The challenge I have is this. People say, if you want me to pay more tax, then you take the lead also in reducing some of the key expenditures that are in your... And we've been talking about the size of government. And the size of government starts from the number of ministers, the number of appointees, the SOEs, and there is a lot of pushback. As if reducing the size of government means cutting salaries of the ministers, and that doesn't.
So there are a lot more things than just the 30%.
Thank you.
The basic
and
salary.
so one of the things you find is that when we allude to hardship, it's the pushback from all the taxes, and you have to admit that even the document states that there's going to be a lot more focus on increasing revenue than on reducing expenditure. Again, this was negotiated without the Ghanaian public having a say, which is fine. But again, the government has to think, when so many people are screaming, shouting, cut ministers, cut the appointees, cut the SOEs, isn't it time for something to be done in that area? Cutting the size of government so that it makes it relatively easier for us to accept the increases in taxes.
So Joe, I get you, and I'm one of those people who call for those. But thinking about it, so we said SOEs, for example, some all of a sudden have 3 deputy chief executives, you know, 2 deputy chief executives, when before that wasn't the situation. So now we say we want to cut down the numbers in the SOE. So do we go back to these people we've employed 2, 3 years, 5, 6, 7 years ago and say, okay, guys, now I want to cut down on the numbers in the SOE and the expenditure, etc. So you deputy chief executive in charge of finance, deputy chief executive in charge of operations, go home, so that we have just one chief executive and the directors doing the job.
All those employees were employed by the government, the president, and appointed by the president. He also has the power to remove them.
Just like ministers.
Yes. He should utilize that power.
They go home and those positions scrap.
Yes. And even some, but isn't that what we are asking? It's like telling me that because they've been appointed, and somebody will go home without being a minister or an appointee.
So they have to be there.
That can't be the solution to the problem. That can't be the solution to the problem where we're saying that show some leadership. Even if you claim it will move the dial, show some leadership.
And the optics.
Yes.
I see. I'm sure he's taking notes, and he'll tell the president and the vice president.
Tell the president. I'm sure the president.
30% reduction.
No, but now everybody did that.
Yeah.
I mean, Mahama also did some 10%.
And I mean, it was just that sometimes, if you are...
No, but you hold your fire, because you are the focus. So let's go around and come back. So let me come to Patrick, Prof. Assuming I understand you also have some things to say. It appears his response is throw the cat around the pigeons, and so I'm sure he's ruffled some feathers. So, Prof, what's your concern? What's contribution?
So I think there are 2 points that I want to address. The first one is about this, whether the government enforced the expenditure cuts. So I think maybe he missed the page I was referring to. So I was talking about point 7 on page 6, and I'm going to read. It says,
so say that again. Point what?
Point 7
on page 6. Okay.
Yes. So this is the point. It says, while some fiscal adjustment was afoot in 2022, the authority's initial consolidation objectives were not achieved. Revenue improved slightly thanks to higher oil prices, but non-oil revenues were significantly below their overly optimistic target, with large underperformance of the new controversial e-levy. This is the next sentence is where my point is. The government was also unable to enforce announced across-the-board spending cuts due to extra budgetary commitments by ministries, departments, and agencies. That point is clear. It's clearly there that the enforcement, the cuts that the government announced, they were not enforced. They were unable to enforce them.
Yes. So, i.e., expenditures committed above appropriated budgetary allocations.
Exactly. So I think that, I think, the other point also about the financial system. I think that, you shouldn't get the impression that, when we talk about what we see in the document, we are being overly critical, because the substantive point I'm making is that we've made huge sacrifices in order to have this IMF program. And it is true. Yes, we did the financial sector cleanup, and the cost of which we haven't finished paying. And so, not to say, I'm not sure how he misinterpreted that, but the substantive point is that both individual Ghanaians and the financial institution are paying hefty prices. I think he will admit that what the domestic debt exchange has done to the profitability and the functioning of the banks. So the broader point within that context is that we are paying hefty prices for us to get this IMF program. And therefore, we need to make sure that the program achieves its objectives and that ultimately the economy is in a better place for all Ghanaians. So that is something that I just wanted to react to.
Very well. So very well. Murtala, Murtala is member of parliament for Tamale Central on the ticket of the NDC. The minority, swiftly after the announcement that Ghana is clinched a program with the IMF, issued a press statement or press document signed by your leader, Atu Forson. And the government of the whole thing is that there's going to be more hardship, even though we've managed to get this IMF deal. As people in parliament and leaders of the country, given the fact that we knew the economy was headed for danger without this IMF deal at this time, I thought that we should have maybe not happy, but we should have heaved a sigh of relief and then be now more focused on how to move the discussion forward rather than saying this, I told you so, things, you didn't listen to me, etc., etc., more hardships are coming, and all of that. It appears that the NDC or the minority wants to cash in So they tell the people that these guys, they don't know what they are doing. We told them, but they didn't do it. They didn't go on time. Now here we are, and there'll be more hashing. That is what I get from the 3-page document from your leader.
It's preposterous to say the least that you assume that the NDC objective basically was to win political, if you like, goals as a result of what this government has done. The NDC has been consistent in our position. And to answer your question, I've listened to him. I've listened to him on my way, and I need to apologize for coming late. I was somewhere. And I didn't even greet good morning.
Yeah, I'm sure we just baptized you.
But I listened to you in particular on my way.
No, you are the person he has to listen to.
You gave him a lot of time. About
no, but it's his day.
At a point, you even said that I've given you
but it's his day.
Yes. So I'm saying that, and once again, like his boss, the attribute
his boss being Dr. Bawumia.
The attribute, the challenges confronting us to either the Ukraine war or COVID. And I shudder to think that he said same, because I have shared several platforms with him, and every time they do that. That is the most disingenuous aspect of politics. And honestly, sincerity matters in politics. You need to be very sincere to the people. If you want to have the buy-in of the citizens, you need to be very sincere. These are a group of people who told us that they will never go to the IMF in the first place. That this country will have everything we ever wanted, and therefore wouldn't go to IMF. And boom, they are the IMF. And now they are celebrating going in for loan. They are celebrating debts, compiling the debts of this country, and they expect us to join them in that euphoria. I really think that the NDC is cautioning them just as we caution them when they refuse to listen. At the time when we asked them to go to the IMF, they refused to do so. They refused to do so. And they are doing so at a time when nothing, significant, apart from even no other option, not much will come out of it. He was downplaying the effect of taxes. 3% tax, and you think that it won't affect businesses? I listened to business people, young people who have set up their own businesses on Joy FM yesterday. And the last time I checked, Joy FM, they are not friends of the NDC. I listened to them, and they were all expressed rage, the consequences of what you have done on their businesses, and by extension, what it will do to job creation. Already we have the highest unemployment rate under the Fourth Republic. You took it from 6.8% under NDC. The president you described as incompetent is 17.4. That was the census figures. 17.4. That is how disastrous they have managed this economy. You see, and it is significant for us to look at the reasons. Ghana is not an island of its own. Ghana is not the only country in Africa. And we need to look at the effects of COVID and the effects of Ukraine war. If there is going to be an impact of COVID and the impact of Ukraine war, Ghana will not be the only country that will be affected. As a matter of fact, many of these countries depend on Ukraine and Russia than we depend on them. The trade relations between Ghana and Russia in 2018 was about $140 million. That was our trade relation between Ghana and Russia. Ivory Coast was more than that. Burkina was more than that. So if you want to look at the effects of that conflict on the economy, then it should affect those countries than it is affecting us today. Now, I'll give you some statistics. Togo, in fact, let me just let's look at inflation. Nigeria, inflation as at 3 months ago, and I'm saying this because, of course, there could be some changes. Inflation in Nigeria was 20.77%. Togo was 7.9%. Ivory Coast, 6.3%. Senegal, 11.9%. Ghana was 37.4%. Today, it is even more than that. Today, our inflation is about 50+%.
It's about 41%.
41. They are celebrating even 41%. It dropped from 54% to 41%. And they think that we should clap hands for them. Maybe perhaps if you could join me to give him some clap so that he can get some satisfaction. Come and look at unemployment. Every government objective is to improve the living conditions of your people. And there is no way you can improve the living conditions of your people than putting in policies to grow the economy. Once the economy grows, opportunities will be created for people to get jobs. But if the economy is not doing well, there's a direct correlation between economy not doing well and joblessness. There's a direct correlation. There cannot be a wider economy which is doing well that you will not have the needed jobs created for its citizens. Let's look at unemployment. Nigeria, 9.79%. Togo, 3.94%. Ivory Coast, 3.47%. Senegal, 3.62%. Ghana, as at that time, in fact, 17.4%. Now, again, COVID. The effect of COVID, the impact of COVID cannot be more dangerous than the lives of citizens that are lost as a result of COVID. If you tell me that we have managed COVID so well, then you should be telling me that fewer people lost their lives as a result of COVID. That is the best way of managing COVID. Now, if you talk about WHO praising Ghana, they praise Togo, they praise Ivory Coast, they praise Nigeria, they praise Senegal, then they praise Ghana. Now, let's look at the impact of COVID to the lives that were lost as a result of COVID in those countries. Togo, in fact, let me look at Nigeria. 3,155 people lost their lives as a result of COVID. Ghana, 1,456 people lost their lives as a result of COVID. Togo, 275 people lost their lives as a result of COVID. Burkina, 396 people lost their lives as a result of COVID.
But in some of those countries, the criticism was that they were not reporting the figures.
Were we also reporting the figures?
No, at least we haven't had that criticism.
What arrogance are we trying to demonstrate? Senegal managed it better than we did. In fact, they reported it better than we did. There were lots of people who died in this country as a result of COVID that was not reported.
May I make your figures easier for you? If you had done this over the population.
No, I will do that. I will do that. No, I will do that. That's what I'm coming at. That is what I'm coming at. If you look at the raw figures, Nigeria has about 3,155.
Against their population.
Work it against 200 million people. Nigeria is more than even 200 million now. So even if you work it against 200 million people, you get 0.001%. Okay? Come and look at Ghana, 1,456. Work it against 32 million people. You get 0.005%. Look at Togo, 275 people. Work it against 12 million or even 10 million. You get 0.003%. Burkina has a 20 million population. 22 million people in Burkina Faso. Work 396 against that. You get 0.001%. So it means that more people lost their lives as a result of COVID in Ghana than any of these countries. So why are we vaunting and boasting that we manage COVID than those countries? Except that this government doesn't care the number of people who lost their lives as a result of COVID. If it is about treating people and getting them out, people were also treated in those countries and they got them out. The fact that more people lost their lives in this country than those countries means that we abysmally manage COVID. Now, don't go and point to me that the WHO praised Ghana. They praised those countries too.
Only that we did not hear them because they wouldn't have had ours too.
Because we're not interested. Some of us who were interested, you can easily Google. They praised those countries too. How they manage it. As a matter of fact, Senegal was even working to get their own vaccine. Government profited from the lives of people in this country as a result of COVID. We all know Frontier Health, a company that belongs to the president's family. And that company had no prior knowledge or experience in testing.
But I don't know about belonging to the president's family.
Who doesn't know that the president's daughters had, please.
But they did perform some important.
Don't tell me you don't know. You know.
No, they did perform.
What are you afraid of?
No, I'm not afraid of anything. But I don't know that the president. I don't know.
Everybody in this country knows that the president's daughter's husband, they own that company.
Which president? Which of the president's daughters?
Ask him. He knows. Just ask him.
You sit here. Because I think the president has 3 daughters. One got married recently.
The daughter who had the courage to call me after a program when I pointed the robbery that is going on at the airport, who had the courage to call me to threaten me. That daughter.
I don't even know about this. I'm hearing this. I'm hearing it for the first time, really. Not for that you were threatening. I'm hearing it for the first time.
Oh yes.
Did you even report to the police?
Did you report to the police that somebody is threatening?
There are some useless threats that you don't even waste your time.
Oh, then it shouldn't be worth talking about.
You want me to mention it happened? You want me to mention the name? I stated it on a different. I can mention the
name.
No,
I mean it may not be necessary. I think it's been some time past, and I'm sure you've dealt with it.
No, that issue has not. That issue will be dealt with. The robbery, the square meter. When she herself told me she paid $30 per square meter, even Marina Mall will pay $30 per square meter. But let me deal with the substantive issues. So I'm saying that argument that COVID and Ukraine occasioned the economic disaster that we experience in this country should be told to the Marines. That is absolutely not true. As a matter of fact, if you listen to the World Bank country director, even his own statement, that the economy was already on its knees before COVID strike. Now, if all the things I have stated, and they can't be contested, because if you contest, we can easily Google them, that these countries are doing better than us, how come that we repeatedly heap our inept incompetence, and sometimes occasioned by thievery, by those in office? We attribute the reasons we are going through these challenges and the reasons why we went to IMF because of this, when those countries are doing better than us. I don't know the kind of advice my brother and his colleagues are giving to the vice president. In the eyes of we begging, your boss bought 100 pickups for the... How many? Okay, so how many? Oh, well,
wait. You're pushing to say he has this.
Wait. If not 100,
then he should tell you how many.
Not to peddle for.
Wait. So you tell us what you know and what the basis of.
That is what is being reported.
By who?
I'm saying the media.
Which media station?
That is what is being
reported. We haven't reported.
There are 3 sides to every story.
We haven't reported that.
There are 3 sides.
We haven't reported.
I'm saying that there are 3 sides to every story. Your side, my side, and the truth. I have said 100. You said no. So how many?
So it's a wait. In any case, you don't know what I bought them on. Who gave him? No, it could have been anything. Who gave him? It could have been contribution from people who support.
Whose contribution?
In his cause.
Whose contribution?
Look, we don't need to.
He doesn't earn more than 50,000.
No, I'm saying what I'm saying is that of course I didn't know that.
No, so you shouldn't be telling me. Allow him to tell me whether.
Yes, but I'm moderating the program.
The first part, you said media station report.
I never mentioned station.
You said media. Media, and I'm asking the simple question. Media.
You know very well as a politician that you don't finance or fund your own campaign from your pocket.
So who finances?
There are friends and people who believe in your cause. There are friends and people who believe in your cause.
That is where the TV of this government.
So are you telling that you finance your campaign?
I'm saying that is where the TV of this country started. This idea of that you must have friends and others who finance you.
But who believe in your cause? Who supports your campaign?
He should be telling us this. I have stated 100. If he thinks it's not 100, assuming I said 5.
Very well. Let's just stay on track.
No, it's not very well. He has challenged the figure I put there. He has challenged the figure I put there. He owes your viewing public the responsibility to tell them how many.
No, you have his time.
So let me proceed. I'm going to give him 30 minutes. I'm saying that I don't know the kind of advices my brother and his colleagues are giving the vice president. Even in the eyes of these challenges and the impending disaster that awaits the people of this country as a result of the corruption and the inept, for which reason we are the IMF, you paraded those pickups on the streets of this country.
Was it moving them to a place or he was showing them off?
Whether moving them, hanging them, they were paraded. Whether Jonah swallowed the fish or the fish swallowed Jonah. That was a swallow. That one too, you didn't see it. Didn't you see them?
No, I saw pictures.
Yes.
But I couldn't count 100. That's the point I mean.
How many did you count?
No, I just saw pictures. And the pictures couldn't have captured 100.
How many? In fact, how many did you count?
They were honorable to divert.
No. It's making a point. It's connecting this to the hardship.
I'm connecting it to the disaster. that is occasion. 3% tax. I am telling you, and I have just said, that I listen to young men, young guys who are starting something on their own. They are struggling. Now, the argument is being made that no, what we are doing, it will not affect some of government policy decisions. It is going to affect businesses. And unemployment is going to soar. Things are going to be worse. The reason why they feel very comfortable in the eyes of even increasing taxes is that they don't pay taxes, virtually. Because if they pay taxes, they have everything free. For all you know, his vehicle here, he got fuel free. You and I would have to struggle to get fuel in our vehicles. He got it free. He gets drinks and everything free. I don't know where my brother lives. If he lives in State Bungalow, he doesn't pay rent. The state pays the rent. So they don't feel the way you and I feel.
So you're talking
and that is why I think.
I guess.
In fact, as a deputy minister and a member of parliament, I live in my own home. In fact, Chamber and Hall for 2 years.
But you got fuel.
No. And let me tell you one thing. This government still owes me. I never had a driver driving. I was driving myself. The state was supposed to pay. I never asked the state to pay that money. Go and check at the Flagstaff House. I never asked the state to pay that money because I chose to drive myself. So don't even go. I say I chose to drive myself. I chose to drive myself. The state had the duty to provide, and I chose to drive myself. I never had a police officer following me everywhere. Not even one day. So when I'm making a statement, I have a moral ground on which I make those statements.
Let's
with all these challenges, unemployment is increasing. Debt to GDP has gone bananas. Nothing is being sold or being bought in this country. Yet they want us to celebrate the disaster that is occasioned. That is what they want us to celebrate. Instead of you trying to even plead with Ghanaians, you are parading pickups because you have become so rich. We knew Dr. Bawumia. He didn't have anything. He didn't have that. Today,
he was a deputy governor, but that's fine.
How much was he paid?
No, the deputy governor is
that he can even as a vice president. Even as a vice president, how much is salary?
He was paid more than you.
I said, even as a vice president, how much is his salary that he can buy 100 pickups and parade them on the streets of this country?
I'm not sure he said he has, but at least I've not heard him say he bought them.
Who gave him? Was it the drug dealer who gave him those pickups?
No, I don't know.
We need to know.
Very well, but you are a member of parliament. I mean, there are many things you can do to get those information. To get that information.
Must we ask? Don't we think that as part of transparent governance?
Well, maybe it's not forthcoming.
So it means that
maybe it's not forthcoming. So let's
why is it not forthcoming?
No, let's get to the next.
There can't be any better person to answer that question than my brother here. He is an advisor to the vice president. He must tell us today.
On technical matters. He's not.
And he also said when I listened to him that they had begun the idea of collecting, property rate. Is there any policy document? Nothing. This was a discussion. This was a discussion by people in the media, including some of us.
At least we saw it in the budget.
You need to mention the number of things in the budget that you just said.
Let me go to
one thing that is
I'll stay with you guys for the next. I'll stay with you for the next.
But let me just conclude. One thing that is conspicuously missing in our budget, except the 2017 budget, one word: corruption.
I see. So I'll stay with you guys for the next 1 hour.
Yeah, but it's important.
No, you have time to deal with that. Okay. So Doc, I mean, Jackson, maybe you should be a doc soon because your work speaks for themselves.
The doctors do propaganda, so sometimes I don't think he may be.
But you also soon becoming a doctor.
No, but he is a doctor.
No, but you are soon becoming. No, he's doing his PhD.
I said these days the doctor seems to be engaged in a lot of propaganda,
which may even make you worse. All right, so I mean, getting the economy back on track, that's what we're all talking about. When this government came, they talked about certain policies and programs that will put this economy on the next level. 1D, 1F, the industrialization drive. Every district will have a factory that will be producing, commodities, a substitute for things we've been importing, giving jobs to the people. We saw the unemployment figures, etc. We saw things like PMJ, planting for food and jobs, PFJ, planting for food and jobs, but food inflation appears still high. Recently, we saw the shortages where the Agric Minister had to create a market of a sort at the Agric Ministry to sell plantain and all of that. I'm not sure what your assessment on all those flagship programs of government, has been and how these have affected the economy overall. Is it time we relook at those to scrap those which require scrapping? Or you think there's something we can do to rejig them to get them working properly and delivering the results we needed for which we created them or we put them together? 1D, 1F, planting for food and jobs.
Actually, we'll start from the one that you've left out, which was One Village, One Dam.
One village.
And to be honest with you, One Village, One Dam was one policy that got me really excited because it had the potential to change this country
all year round
from rain-fed agric to irrigation-led. That has died.
It died with the first step.
And been buried. Right? We go to 1D, 1F. The challenge with 1D, 1F is that there seems to be so many of them we were hoping that there will be new factories and new businesses that will be opened in different districts of this country. Unfortunately, we've not seen that new growth, and a lot of the growth we've seen has been really rejuvenation, which can be wrong, but it's not been as successful as we hoped for. Of course, then you could go in as for planting for food and jobs, my personal view is that the statistics have been so mangled that they are unreliable. And it's very difficult to judge, because planting for food and jobs at one time was supposed to have created over 1 million jobs. Whatever it is, those statistics are so unreliable because they don't pan out to any other independent sources that we check to. That planting for food and jobs, in my opinion, we can't, and what you can't measure properly, it just does not exist. And if we've been so successful at planting for food and jobs, why are the unemployment statistics so high? So, well, the unemployment statistics alone should lead us to think planting for food and jobs also did not deliver anywhere near what it was supposed to deliver. And when you look at the current inflation, which has been led by food inflation, my conclusion is that a lot of these projects did not deliver to the potential, right? And as much as some like one village, one dam created so much excitement.
But all the policies created a lot of excitement. So maybe the ideas were great.
The ideas were fantastic. These were not just mere slogans. There were things that got us excited. Unfortunately,
the execution hasn't been the best.
Yes.
For planting for food and jobs, for example, the former minister who wants to be president now, appears very excited or happy about the successes in the area, even though it's difficult to point.
I will just request that they subject those statistics to a little bit more scrutiny, so that we can be able to join in the joy and pleasure they have.
It appears on the exchange rate front, or the foreign exchange front, we appear to be enjoying some stability. Others have put that to the fact that we are not paying or we are not servicing debts, and a lot of all of that. I don't know, you are in the sector, I don't know what you attribute that to, but to be fair, in the last couple of months, there's been some relative stability. I mean, in some cases, the CD are appreciating and all of that. What do you put that to?
Well, I would like to go, one of the interesting things was that when we in December, we declared a default, there was an opinion of why has Ghana rushed to declare default. But on hindsight, that default meant that we were not pushing out as much foreign currency to pay our creditors. So we did leave enough to keep the currency relatively stable. Right. And in as much as people would talk about the announcements that of the deal with the IMF and missed deadlines, I also think that constant reminder that the IMF deal was coming, even if the deadlines were missed, helped keep our currency stable, because it just reminded us that
money was coming.
Money was going to come.
I see. So not just down to the declaration of the default, but the promise of the IMF money coming also kept
I think the promise made even a bigger difference than the default.
Okay. So if you were to tell us two things we can be doing now that we have the IMF deal, how to stay on track and all of that, what would be your prescription? What would your prescription be?
Well, first of all, scale down your expectations. There are tough times ahead. That's what I would tell you. Scale down your expectations. There are tough times ahead. If you are a business, cut costs, become lean, and be ready to pay the taxes that are coming up.
I see. Prof. Esumeh, quite a number of things, Mr. I'm particularly concerned about the job figures and the fact that we cannot employ beyond 0.5% of the current figures. But of course, Dr. Kabiru Mahama is trying to clarify that doesn't affect education or the education and health sectors, which is quite some good news, because a lot of the guys we have out there who continue demonstrating and continue picketing, are in the health and education sectors. And if those have been exempted, that is quite some good news. Of course, the other general areas, administration and etc., we can deal with that, as we progress. Shouldn't that be something we should be happy with at least? That is better than 0% unemployment, as we've seen before in previous programs.
So, Salom, I think the last time, when we were in the last IMF program, a similar net zero freeze on employment, excluding education and health, were announced. Okay. I mean, I'm sure when you speak to people who run education and health institutions, that exemption doesn't mean that they still get the opportunity to hire as and when needed. So, from where I sit, I don't think it changes much. Don't forget, there was never a point where we announced that we finished up or we faced out that particular restriction. So it's really a real, but overall, what it means is that, the public sector is not going to hire as many people as before. But in terms of the broader point going forward, I think, when you look at the document, you do see that beyond trying to establish macroeconomic stability, you see there are specific programs in terms of building competitiveness and diversifying the export base. And I think all that sounds good. A lot of these were already in the 2023 budget that was read last year. So in terms of whether we are planning to fix the economy beyond the fiscal restructuring and the stability, that something has been put on paper. I think where I get concerned is that, you see, like you were discussing what the flagship programs have done. 1D1F, Planting for Food and Jobs and all. So these ideas are not exactly new. And this government also tried, to implement them. So in my view, if you try to bring some of these ideas back, it would be good to tell us why it didn't go well at the first instance and what will be different this time. So I think that gives me a little bit of concern. The other thing is that these attempts to restructure the real economy, they are not part of any of the performance criteria that will determine whether we are making progress or not.
I see.
And what is not going to be monitored, you wonder whether we really actually go by them and stick to them. So I think on paper, it sounds good that, we want to do things beyond just macroeconomic stability and then also trying to restructure the economy. But, we've been here before, especially for a government that, came into office with these, well-crafted ideas about how to restructure the economy. Because essentially that's what the combination of 1D, 1F, Planting for Food and Jobs, and One Village, One Dam.
We're all supposed to do, yes, to restructure the economy and all of that.
Exactly. But we've had it for years and we haven't, at least, even government officials should agree that in the last couple of years, it's gone downhill. So to tell us that we want to do some of those things better, it has to start with where things didn't work well.
A proper assessment of this.
Exactly.
Very well. So
exactly.
Yes.
And what the corrective measures will be going forward.
Very well. We will take a short break now. The next segment is the politics, really. But I will have Prof and Joe for the first part of that. When we look at matters of, restoring the licenses of some of the banks, etc., that Mahama is mentioning, and the feasibility of working with just about 60 ministers before we get into some of the key political issues. These matters, I'm sure you will have views on. This is the big issue on 97.3 City FM. We'll be right back with more.
Sure say your hospital go happy if you hear the filler way I get for your dog.
I still have your underwear in my office drawer.
I could never imagine you would end up being my stepmother.
Anybody with the capacity to give you great joy can also bring you insufferable pain.
You're welcome back to the big issue. The studio is getting heated. Mutala, I have to behave. So
you see, I haven't fair to you.
No. So this is the big issue. 97.3 City FM, City TV, City Tube, and on Facebook. So we've been dealing with the IMF matters and all of that. We're just dovetailing into some other aspects of the politics. President Mahama in Tamale the past few days made a number of comments in his acceptance speech. I want Joe Jackson and Dr. Sumi to respond to those things briefly. I'll come to Dr. Kabiru, who has a number of responses to some of the things Mutala has raised, and I'll give him time to deal with that. So, no, he will respond to them. So, Joe, restoring the licenses of some of the banks which were collapsed or acquired by, which were collapsed by into CBG and all of that, is that a difficult thing to do? Is it a feasible thing to do? Is it a wise thing to do? Now we have CBG, for example, which is an amalgamation of a number of banks. How is it going to? Is it going to disintegrate them? What's the plan? Or how does it work? Or how will it work in your view?
You know, I've been on record on this issue, and I said, listen, it's going to be a really difficult thing to do. It is because of the entanglements and because so much time has passed, right? In fact, if you extrapolate to 2025, which will be the assuming that
he comes back,
President Mahama wins, and at this moment, that's all we can say. It will be 2025. That will be how many years? That will be close to 7 years after the fact, right? And it becomes very difficult to understand how you're going to, when you restore a license, does it mean that they come back and they recapitalize, set up another institution, get their clients back? You know, it's the that's why I went on record on Twitter to say, if there is established, and he gave two caveats, which are very important. He said, where the licenses were found to be have been taken, unjustifiable taken, and then two, he says, where practicable. And so
so the practicability.
Yes. And it's on the practicability that I say, listen, restoring licenses.
It's about issuing other licenses so they can set up other businesses, other banks. Because you know that while this was done, the other regulatory matters kicked in. So they cannot be directors of banks, they cannot establish banks for a certain number of years and all
Some
of that.
of those things can be fixed, but it's not just when you give a license, it's just as a license, it's the capital, the customers, some of those issues can be fixed. But restoring the license itself, it's a very complicated issue.
But would it be fair on those people too? Assuming the licenses were not properly revoked. And can we say because because of the fraction of time, you know, they go to bed forever, losing their businesses?
This country has laws.
Right? So some of them are in the courts.
Yes, some of them are in the courts. And if, as a shareholder, I feel that my regulator has unfairly treated me, there are avenues for redemption. We can make those avenues faster. But remember that the first rule was it unjustifiably taken, and how practical is it? I mean, some of the in the last few days we've had somebody whose name is to be expunged from
Parliament,
from
parliamentary records.
Yes, but he's also taking part in. That's interesting, isn't it? He's taking part in debates.
So the debates, does his name or contributions get expunged?
No, currently he's not in Parliament, you know, because of we have some.
So what happens to his contributions in Parliament?
Previous contributions.
Maybe we should be asking of what happens to his constituents when in a country where you have a judicial system that says that yes, you are still not being taken out as a member of Parliament, yet you can represent your people in a country like
But let's go back to where we were. issue is that it's going to be difficult, it's going to be challenging, and maybe, like the caveat said,
practicable.
Not practicable.
I see.
But there are other sides to it, right? Ghanaian ownership of the financial sector, for me, is something that I'm passionate about, right? Unfortunately, the fallout from the financial sector cleanup meant that the concentration of of our financial sector in foreign hands is now higher than desirable. Yeah. So some sort of policies to assist and give opportunities to Ghanaian businesses to own that financial sector will be good. Good. And I actually believe that maybe there's an undue focus on the issue of retaining the licenses when we should be asking questions about, so what are we going to do to help reduce
Ghanaians take charge of their financial sector.
Thank you. Because ultimately, we must take charge of this economy. Nobody will come and fix this economy for us.
I see. All right. But Professor Sumin, your take on the licenses bit quickly.
Okay. So, I think I get worried when I hear promises like that. I think that, you can, and Joe Jackson, that he does more finance than I do. And any finance expert will tell you that the state of some of the banks, that cleanup was necessary. You can legitimately question whether whether a different approach could have been used or whether some of the processes could have been different. That's a legitimate question to raise, but to raise. But there's no question that some cleaning up was needed. But the reason why a promise coming from such a high-profile person worries me is that, in this country, licenses are not given by politicians. They are given by the central bank. So when you make such a promise, you are implying that maybe politicians are able to influence and direct the central bank to give licenses. And I think that's why it really works.
But is that strange? I mean, everybody will be surprised that someone is surprised that could have been or that could be the issue. That could be the way it runs. Of course, on paper, Bank of Ghana, independent, etc., not subject to the control of anybody. They have their own governor who is the chairman of the board, etc., all in an attempt to insulate it from external influences. But that could be on paper. In reality, is that what happens? That, I think, is a general consideration.
So let's say that is conversations that people have in corridors, and that these are suspicions.
I see.
When you hear statement like this, it gives that more
suspicion, some weight.
Exactly. And then, I think, even assuming that that's the general perception, what do we want to do? We want to build stronger institutions and move on from there. So we really don't want, sort of formalizing this idea that actually that's what happens. So that's why it concerns me. So, because there's and the way it came out, there was no sense that, we are going to try and encourage these people, especially we want more Ghanaian banks to support our domestic economy. Therefore, we will encourage people to set up more institutions. That's not how it came across. It came across like we are going to restore licenses to people who had them and somewhat were presumed to have lost them illegitimately. And as you've already pointed out, those who are convinced that they shouldn't have lost their licenses, they are using the legal processes to challenge. So I think that, for me, that comment worried me.
I see.
More than anything else.
All right. Thank you so much for your time this morning. We are grateful as always. Thanks so much for joining us, Professor Sumi, economist, University of Ghana. Very insightful thoughts on the matters we are discussing. Thank you so much. All right, this is the Big Issue, 97.3 City FM. So we're back in studio with Murtala and Dr. Kabiru Mahama. All right, so Dr. Kabiru, you had some responses to make on some of the things that were said generally about the economy, the IMF, and Murtala.
Yeah, so thank you very much. I think that I need to state clearly and emphatically, nowhere in the document has it been stated that government is limiting hiring to 0.5% of the current figure. Nowhere in the document. So any discussion made to that effect is a misrepresentation of the document. What the document says, essentially, is that wage increase is going to be limited. Wage bill and hiring is going to be limited to 0.5% of GDP. Okay, so that is not to state that government is limiting hiring to 0.5% of the current figure of employment. So we shouldn't carry any of this notion out to the effect that this is what government has planned to do as part of the IMF program, unless, of course, someone is able to point to me in the 126-page document where it is stated that...
So I think page 9,
yes.
Point 17, the 2023 budget and associated bills enacted as a prior action for the program are consistent with these objectives. And it goes on to list a number of things. So point 1, lowering capital expenditures through project reprioritization, providing around 0.9% of GDP of savings.
Which I already corrected,
containing the wage bill by limiting wage increases.
So that's the hiring. So that's what I've
0.5% of GDP.
Yeah, that's what. How do you limit wage increase?
So that's for you to do.
That's why I just explained that limiting wage bill to 0.5. So you are talking of an increment on wage bill, limiting the mode of increment of wage bill. So we don't need to interpret that to mean the rendition and even the clear literal interpretation of that statement will not lean to any co-interpretation of the government of the current.
So it could
GDP, even in the first place.
It could so be that there will be no employment at all because workers are crying for wage increases.
I'm coming to look about the employment. Why I said there are exemptions. Okay, even the rendition, the use of 0.5 of GDP is not employment. It's not about the employment.
Yes, I get that.
So we are setting records here. We are trying to educate Ghanaians, and when we are educating Ghanaians, it's important as stress on that point. If you read page 11, page 11 and page 59 together, it talks about social spending, where it is stated clearly that government would increase spending. In fact, the government would increase spending in social, in health and education, okay, including about access to secondary school, improving learning facilities and all that. Increasing spending is a whole basket, okay, capacity, human resources, infrastructure is there in page 11, 59. Combined reading of the two will tell you, will convey this particular understanding and no other understanding. So please let us correct that. Now, coming to the issue of employment, my brother mentioned a lot of figures. It is on record, and the Vice President highlighted that no government, he has made comparison with other countries. Okay, good, but let's even come domestic. Comparison between their alternative and the President Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo. No government has created in his first and second term more jobs than this particular government. Okay, over 2 million jobs have been created, and the Vice President provided the deeds and evidence of all that. No, up to date, no one has gone to challenge. But even that, let's go to the statistics. Let's go to the statistics of performance of government over the time. The World Bank has provided very comprehensive data. Under President John Mahama, 2012, unemployment.
So which document are you reading?
I mean, if you go to the World Bank, International Labour Organization data. Under John Mahama, 2012, unemployment rate was 5.9%. 2013, it had increased to 6.2%. 2014, increased to 6.5%. 2015, it increased again to 6.8%. And 2016, it reduced to 5.5%. So under his tenure and until 2016, there was increase in unemployment rate. Now, under Nana Akufo-Addo, the same source, 2017, it was 4.2%. 2018, it increased to 4.3%. And then it remained the same in 2019. 2020, it was 4.7%. And then 2022, it remained 4.7%. So the data in comparison between the two, he can go to Nigeria and compare. He can go to, South Africa, he can go to Togo. But within the government, within Ghana, and between governments, the Nana Akufo-Addo government, in terms of employment, is unchallenged, unmatched. So we would have to know that.
So how about the census figure of 17.4%?
I'm coming that there are issues with this. That's what I'm saying, that where you have data issue, or even the IMF has noted it in the report, okay, about the capacity of local institutions in terms of data management, in terms of. So that's why you can take the census figures. You can compare to the census figure under their term. We can do the analysis. But I've always asked, and I was on GTV program with you, and I told him that the census figures does not model for the percentage of people who are being ruled out, and the now many graduates who are now yearning to get jobs employed in the public sector. That model hasn't catered for that. But in the terms of the ILO modeling of unemployment rate and using that to the basis of benchmarking across country, they have to make provision for that. Okay? They have always argued that you use percentage. Of course, percentage make comparison easy. But if in 2016, there were 100 graduates out, okay, looking for job. All these graduates are no more self-employed than if they were not in school, they would have said they are farmers, so they are employed. But more people having the opportunity of formal education means that they are now transitioning from their self-employment or from their farming activity to say looking for job in the formal sector. That's going to increase the propensity of people telling or responding that I do not have job and I am unemployed. Those dynamics are not catered for when you are doing the census analysis. So that's why the reliance on international data where these covariates are catered for is important. And that is the data I'm reading to you. Aside that, and as I mentioned that 2.3 million jobs have been created under this government as compared to theirs, I would want to state categorically that when it comes to graduate unemployment, the Association of Graduate Unemployees was there under their region. Have you heard of it of recent times? Of course, that is not to suggest that every graduate is employed.
Maybe you've absorbed the leaders.
Not even, apart from the leaders, they can always form new leadership. Okay? They can always form new leadership. He mentioned issue about inflation. He went to compare with Togo, and I even said the analysis was what? Why will you compare the inflation of Togo and Cote d'Ivoire with that of Ghana when you know that inflation is one of the factors that determine exchange rate is one of the factors that determine inflation in your country, and that these countries are practicing a fixed exchange rate regime. It is one logic. Okay, that comparison to start with ab initio is flawed. Okay, we can go to critique.
But the point you made about the COVID and the percentages.
I'm coming to COVID. I have not been. I'm taking one at a time. Okay, I'm taking one at a time. You also pointed to him rightly that COVID death is per capita. Okay, he used the per capita in some other countries, and it is clear. It is what is clear to us as a government, and even apart from the WHO mentioning it. Ghana management of the COVID in terms of reporting of the figures, in terms of mortality, in terms of response has been unmatched. The president has highlighted that they have not come out to point a specific figure or to state the otherwise, where they think that, the president has lied to Ghanaians on the management, the WHO has lied to Ghanaians on the management of COVID. Okay. With the absence,
but the point he's making is that
the point is even making the
like
source
Senegal,
of his figures.
Senegal,
have you verified the source of his figures?
No, currently like Senegal and
I am even
have also been praised. Just
I'm
Ghana has been
asking,
praised.
have you verified? We are not saying that Ghana is the only country in the world that has
I think I've also done a similar analysis.
We are not arguing that Ghana is the only country in the whole world that has managed COVID very well. That's not the argument of the president. But the president and the government is saying that Ghana's management of COVID has been one of the best. Okay, and that is on record, and that is undisputed. Talking about expenditure on that, on the back of that, and people going to that, and the accusation of people who get contract to that, and it's a member of parliament with oversight responsibility, the auditor general is there, and COVID expenditure have been audited as part of the prior actions for the IMF program. I don't want to go into that because the politics of it the politics of that can be played. But for the records, IMF, as part of the prior action, had asked that we audit the COVID expenditure. That was audited. It was audited.
We call it auditing.
Whatever name you call it, that was an auditor's general report on the COVID expenditure. The loopholes were identified. They have made recommendations. Even the report has included some of the gaps, and they have recommended measures or guidelines on emergency expenditure. Okay, following the lapses that have been identified with the COVID expenditure. That said, this is allegation of contract being awarded to whosoever. For me, there is no shred of evidence to support that. Even if there's evidence, what prevents him from taking the right measures to do? He mentioned about the vice president vehicles, and I think that I ordinarily
would see you drive one of those vehicles soon.
I ordinarily would not respond to such
response.
Sterile propaganda.
Oh, really?
Cooked by in their dilapidated propaganda kitchen.
Dilapidated propaganda kitchen.
To swell the image of the vice president. When it came, the members of parliament, you thought that they would have known better. They would have not been lured into this particular ditch of propaganda. They would not be moved by the antics and to not, because of the fear of Bawumia being the candidate for the MPP and beating John Mahama in the election. Because of that fear, they jumped into the fray. They never asked whose vehicles are those 6 vehicles that were seen on the back of the trailer.
There were 6 vehicles.
6 vehicles.
Not 100.
Not 100.
Whose vehicles?
There's not anywhere in the world, their wildest imagination, have they cited any 100 vehicles. Okay? These are vehicles, private, even John Mahama, they had converted state vehicles. Okay? State vehicles into party vehicles.
Which vehicles?
So you know that
the Mahindra cars.
The Mahindra cars were state vehicles?
They were state procured by the state.
How?
Okay? Aside that,
how?
John Mahama had paid.
No, but that's a serious point.
He knows that.
Who knows what?
The
point about the Mahindra is important.
Mr. Selon, let me make this point.
But this Mahindra point is
important. You can come with federal. Let me make my point.
No, you are the one provide evidence. You're saying you can come.
Mr. Mahama had gone and has asked for the public to donate to his campaign, and that the donation was what was used to pay each delegate 40 Ghana cedi after their transportation. What makes them think that the vice president has not got the goodwill? What makes them think that the vice president cannot seek support from individuals to support by way of vehicle or whatever donation to the campaign? In any case, the 6 vehicles that you saw, the 6 vehicles that you saw were not vehicles donated to the campaign. They were vehicles by a private person who supports the cause, and the vehicle that will be returned to that person after the campaign.
So
they are not even vehicles that are permanently or donated to the vice president.
So they just branded them.
They are branded. These vehicles were branded for the purpose of supporting the campaign. In any case, the vice president in his entire life of work, in his goodwill outside and within the country, can have people, even if one wants vehicle. In fact, I will even see on this platform appeal to more private people, to more volunteers, to more Ghanaians, and more people even abroad to donate more vehicles, because we want to have at least 1 vehicle per constituency in order to do our campaign very well now into the 2024 election. So I will even appeal more that if more people have the support, they have the wherewithal, and they can support the vice president in this regard, they should come. We are willing, and we will have an open, transparent campaign financing that they were never able to provide. So the issue of vice president vehicle is something that I never even thought you allow to even drag or drill this whole discussion of IMF program.
But you see, if the country, we are saying IMF, the country is at the hardship, etc., and we see a number of vehicles being carted somewhere.
You should have asked him. This country is in Ejura, Sejidumasi, one of their own, was seen spreading money.
But the OSP is dealing with that.
That's what I'm saying, that he should not come here to talk about the vice president, someone giving a vehicle, his vehicle, okay? Not the vice president, someone spreading money in his own party, the party as a whole, and people individually. If you consider them jointly and severally, they have no moral right to question the vice president having vehicles, 6 vehicles. The vice president in his entire life, he could have even bought 10 vehicles. Okay,
but this one he didn't.
That's what he didn't even buy them. So even if he sees 6 vehicles,
who was that businessman?
If he sees 6 vehicles being on the trailer, being sent to a destination,
but in the spirit of transparency and openness, shouldn't you know the person who gave him this?
And I'm saying that in the spirit,
because the fear is
the vehicle are not given to him.
Yeah, who donated them for the time?
I'm saying that they are not donated to him
for the time.
Whatever they are not donated to. So in any case, all these questions are not relevant because the vehicles are not.
No, we don't have to know who is supporting our vice president.
Who is that?
Because tomorrow that person may be favored in a way.
And I'm saying that you may need to know who supports the vice president campaign.
No, in the spirit of openness and transparency.
In the spirit of transparency, in the spirit of good governance, in the spirit of the fact that you don't want a situation where a 4th vehicle will be given to your president of a republic. Okay, after a contract has been awarded to him, you will want to know who supports your vice president, and I don't have problem with that. Okay, and we can question that. But I'm saying that until that person comes out to tell you that I want my identity to be disclosed. Okay, you have people donating to campaign, and the campaign they don't want their identity to be disclosed. Okay, and I even say
so
that.
until that happens, then you always be asked, and you always have to find reasons.
And I'm saying that there's not any reason, because look, I can brand my car, the car I'm using, my private car I'm using now. I can brand it with Bawumia campaign as a Bawumia, and I go on the road with it. So do you need the Bawumia campaign to come and explain?
But you admit that, given the economic times we are in, you see a number of vehicles being moved somewhere.
He said you were six.
That certainly should raise eyebrows.
And I'm saying that if under the times we are living, if vehicles are moved somewhere, branded in a party distance, a normal and a reasonable person should be asking, who are for those vehicles? Who bought the vehicles? It is very infantile for you to just jump into the conclusion that the fact that the vehicles are branded in, say, John Mohammed's name means that John Mohammed has procured the vehicle, and John Mohammed is insensitive to Ghanaians by having those vehicles.
Very well.
Okay, it's very unfair to do that. I mean, you made them raise a lot of issues.
I see your list.
I want to respond to them.
But you have been the one with the lion's share of the time.
No, but you in the.
Can I talk?
I'll take a break. I'll take a break and come back. So that's Dr. Kabiru Mahama responding to a lot of things, and Murtala is still here wanting to pile more pressure. This is the big issue we're looking at. We've looked at the IMF, we're now looking at the NDC, but the IMF matters and the matters are arising, keep rearing their heads. We'll be right back and we'll continue the last lap of the program. Don't go away.
And just as was anticipated, day 4 has been long. But finally, we are at the Red Clay Studios. Exhausted, but excited. Because at 9 p.m., the night is still very young. We had quite the experience at the Red Clay Studios. With drummer and dance, with color and class, patrons were treated to reenactments of various folklore of the northern region. And the Caravanites would simply not be left out of the fun. Catch the ending part of day 4 of the Heritage Caravan Diaries as it happened at the Red Clay Studios every weekday on City TV.
Yeah, welcome back to the big issue. We are live on 97.3 City FM. We're on City TV, we're on CityTube and Facebook. My guests this morning, Ibrahim Murtala Mohammed, Honorable MP Comrade, MP for Tamale Central. Did you go unopposed? Or you went unopposed? Yeah. So in the Tamale enclave, all of you went unopposed?
Yeah.
Suhini?
Except Honorable Aviation.
Okay. That is Sagnarugu.
Yes, I know. It's also with
so it's okay. But I was looking at the name Tamale. So Sagnarugu is in Tamale, I see.
Yes, an area in Tamale.
Okay, so Haruna went unopposed. Suhini went unopposed, and yourself. Yeah. So it means you guys are good, or there are not enough strong people there to contest you. I mean, and Dr. Tia Abdul Kabiru Mahama, Technical Vice President of the President.
He wants to contest my sister Wale Wale.
He's also my guest
and he's
on the program.
A lot of campaign.
And so we are dealing with matters from the political wave of this week, and a number of things have come up. President Mahama, in his acceptance speech at Tamale, in his bid to ginger the base and provide hope, made a number of comments. Said that, for example, when he wins, or if he wins power, he will run the country with just around 60 ministers, in his quest to say that he's sensitive to the times and he will reduce the size of government. As you may well know, a lot of people have called on President Akufo-Addo to reduce the size of his government, but that hasn't appeared to work so far. He is saying that if he comes, it will be one of the first things he will do. He also talked about restoring the licenses of some of the banks which were revoked. He says those ones which were unfairly revoked, he will give them back to them. And a number of things he said. Also, the contest of last week produced some casualties. Alhaji Abi Efuseni is not returning to Parliament in 2025 on the ticket of the NDC. Dr. Kwabena Donkor is not returning. And a number of other high-profile people are also not returning. That's what we are looking at. So Harun Murtala raised an earlier point about funding of the vice president campaign, And that appears to have incurred some responses from Dr. Tia Abdul Kabiru Mahama, who is with the Office of the Vice President, about some vehicles. But I think that has been generally dealt with so we can make progress.
No, it has not been dealt with. It is what he did was, again, to deceive your viewing public. But I think that the viewing public are smarter than he thinks they are. You know, I have listened to many slippery comments, honestly, on matters such as this. I have never witnessed the kind I have witnessed this afternoon coming from my brother. In one breath, he thinks that you cannot make such conclusions. You need to be very careful. In another breath, he went to talk about Ford vehicle, which he knows in the heart of his heart. President Muhammad never sat in that car. That car was added to the fleet of state cars. And Manasseh, please, it is important. It is important. Please, why? President Kufuor received vehicles from Gaddafi. I was then the Secretary General of the All Africa Students Union.
He added it to the fleet.
Exactly. He received vehicles after the AU summit in 2007. Maybe perhaps he wasn't in the country. President Kufuor received series of fleet of vehicles from Gaddafi. Did Gaddafi bribe him? So this is not the first time. As a matter of fact, presidents receive vehicles as long as those vehicles are not used for their personal use. And he never did that. So that argument and trying to is neither here nor there. I can tell you, I was even being charitable by mentioning 100. He knows that Dr. Bawumia has promised every single constituency a pickup.
As promised?
Yes, it is just a matter of time. He is denying that there are 6. I am challenging you and challenging him that when they begin to distribute those vehicles to the constituencies, I expect this station to shame him. And he knows he'll be shamed. He knows. You see, in an attempt to
But he said he's promised, so maybe he's working on it.
They are delivering them. What they delivered was just part of it. He's failing to tell us, or he failed to tell us who delivered them. You think that we don't deserve the right to know? If you think that it was not bought by Dr. Bawumia, someone, private person donated it. Who is that private person? We need to know. In this country, President Kufuor said a private person renovated his house. You remember? Ghanaians demanded to know who that private person was. They came and said it was one farmer. You think that we do not deserve that right to know who bought those vehicles?
But we also admit that so like the President Kufuor era, I mean, we didn't know. I don't know.
Oh, many people knew. Even me as a student. Yes, but
they should tell us. They should tell us. It's something we should all work towards.
That time we have come very far. Dr. Bawumia should tell us. I can tell you on authority, there are not 6 vehicles. He knows that. You see, there's a popular saying in the North, and he is familiar with that saying. That is only the mouth that lies. The heart knows the truth. He knows that he was just being untruthful on this matter.
But
in an attempt to cover how he will be exposed in the future, he says, we are working towards getting people to donate vehicles for each constituency. And he said that each constituency per vehicle. You are buying them. You would have to provide us with evidences where you got those things. Another statement he made for me that was very interesting. He said that no, on the issue of unemployment, let's look at what the ILO have stated. Under the NDC, both the ILO and the Statistical Service provided the same figures of unemployment in this country. 6.8. I'm saying that 6.8. Now, he said 2016, it was 5 point something. You know why I'm not mentioning 5 point something? I'm mentioning the figure which was provided by the Statistical Service in this country.
The ILO.
I'm mentioning the figure which was provided by the Statistical Service in this country. The same criteria they use is the same criteria that we are using to measure the level of unemployment under this government. So he says that no, let's talk about ILO. Between the Statistical Service and the ILO, which of these institutions is better equipped, properly positioned to appreciate the level of unemployment in this country? Which?
Of course.
Now, in any case, it's the Statistical Service. I'm coming. Please, it's not about capacity.
No, it's about capacity.
I'm saying that it is. Are you telling me that the Statistical Service doesn't have the capacity
to do that?
In one breath, when the Statistical Service talks about how the economy is growing, let's praise them. In another breath, don't look at it. Now, let me look at a budget statement. A budget statement which was presented to the people of this country by the Minister of Finance for and on behalf of the President. And when you take the budget statement, the Minister says that I'm presenting this budget for and on behalf of the President. Ideally, it means that the President should have been the one presenting the budget statement. What was the unemployment rate in the budget statement? 13.something%. Youth unemployment, what was it? Now he said that we should not look at it. Whether ILO or the budget statement presented by anybody, this government has done disaster. I mean, it's a disaster. You have increased the joblessness in this country than anybody can think of. So he's now rubbishing the statistical service. He's now telling us that the statistical service doesn't have the capacity and the competency to compute the unemployment in this country. But you see, this is not the first time. You remember when NDC was in power, Dr. Bawumia came out and said that the statistics provided as a result of inflation in this country by the statistical service was wrong. The boss at the statistical service was not appointed by President Mahama. He was appointed by this president. Some of the employees at the statistical service were engaged under President Kufuor, and they are still there. Now he's saying that let's talk about the ILO. You see, that is the funny aspect of it. Ridiculously funny. That let us not talk about this. You see, another thing that he made there for me, thank God I'm not an economist, to be very honest with you. Because to be very honest, for him to go on that tangent, for me, is shocking. He said that I do know that the exchange rate is what determines the inflation in Ghana. It is not the only determinant factor of inflation in this country.
Never says the only.
No, you said that.
But
you said that the exchange rate determines.
It does.
And I'm saying that is not
the only.
That is the level of disingenuity in the comments he made. That is the level of disingenuity. When I was making references to the unemployment and inflation in those countries, look, perhaps he was in a deep, long slumber. You better wake up. I was talking about why you are justifying the mess created by the incompetence and the thievery of the political elite, spearheaded by President Nana Addo and your boss. That you cannot attribute the challenges facing us to COVID and Ukraine. And I was making references to inflation in those countries. Whether it was exchange rate or fixed rate or whatever rate they use, inflation is inflation. Get that very clearly. The impact of inflation in any country.
But the general situation, I mean, a lot of those countries you mentioned were French-speaking countries.
So
and their system in terms of
Nigeria is a French
exchange rate. Nigeria
is a French-speaking country.
So the issue of the mention of
our
Nigeria,
economy was the second largest and doing better apart from Nigeria before COVID. So let us even not talk about those countries because anywhere you go, they shift the goalposts. Let's talk about Nigeria. Inflation in Nigeria, 20.77%. Nigeria with all the problems they have there.
But Nigeria is a stronger economy.
It doesn't still matter.
It could mean.
In one breath, when we're doing better than Ivory Coast and Burkina, let's celebrate it. Today they are doing better than I say. No, they are French-speaking countries.
But our economy is still bigger than that.
I'm saying that it's not about doing better. I'm saying that when we're doing well, before in 2016, our economy was the second largest and doing better than most of these countries. Now, even in 2017, when they came and inherited the success story created by the NDC, they were celebrating it. They didn't tell us that Togo, Ivory Coast, Burkina were French-speaking countries. Today, they are telling us that, they are French-speaking countries and don't make such comparisons. And again, he talked about per capita. What is more per capita in terms of the effects of COVID than what I did? My understanding of per capita is you do what's the name? You work out the raw figure based on the population. You divide it by that.
I never had problem with.
No, but you said that. Hold on.
It's good that you did.
Hold on.
Anyway,
I'm saying that more people died in this country than they died in those countries, and they quickly say, they were not reporting. They reported better than we did. Are you then telling me that we reported better than those countries? And then when you raise the issue of the WHO praising other countries, say no, we talked about Ghana. I mean, sometimes you see, the arrogance in governance is one of the problems that are affecting this country. So to attribute the mess that is created to COVID and Russia-Ukraine problem, for me, is the most bizarre attributes that anybody can ever make. But there's another very important point. Now, you see, when we're talking about dollar to cedi under the NDC, how was it? In fact, decency in governance. You guys have taken it to the lowest level, decency in governance. This country is no longer respected. You have a president who had been a minister of foreign affairs, yet he doesn't even still appreciate diplomatic finance in terms of his communication. You saw what he did when he went to Burkina, and you saw the embarrassment, he subjected the entire country to when he traveled to that country. They were not even willing to shake hands with him. The military leader was not willing to shake hands with him. When he got down to shake ministers and he stretched his hands, they were not willing to shake hands with him. I mean, the most irresponsible and reckless statement to have been made by a president is when you get yourself engaged in a conflict that has nothing to do with you. Absolutely nothing to do with you. And perhaps he ought to be reminded, and this government ought to be reminded, that look, the trade relations between Ghana and Russia as of 2008 was about $140 million. Even European countries that are a bit self-sufficient than us, never got themselves engaged in it. Who was the president trying to please? Now you do that, the next day you move in there. Now, don't you think that the need to have stability in countries within the sub-region is as a result of collaborative efforts between and among states? Now, when you publicly accuse another state, a state that shares boundaries with you in several of the areas. Look, Burkina share boundaries with Ghana too. They share boundaries with Ghana. Now, when you make such statement, it is going to affect your trade relations. It is going to affect stability in those countries. Now, let's look at even corruption. And like I said, the only word that is missing in the annals of this government is corruption. Go and look at the 2017 financial statement. Every single paragraph in that statement, they found a way to mention corruption and how they were going to fight it. As the years gone by, they started moving away from the word corruption.
But they've set up the Office of the Special Prosecutor. They've made huge allocations to the Auditor General's office.
The Office of the Special Prosecutor himself publicly was crying that they are denying him the resources that would ensure the office runs. How did Mr. Martin Amidu describe the president? The mother serpent for corruption. So please, this charade of providing an office that takes care of corruption, when the man himself is the leader of the corruption. Look, the thievery in this country is done at the high echelon of the political elites in this country. Everybody knows. Everybody in this country knows. Look, no matter what we do with the IMF, the only way we can find solution to this is what? Sincerity in governance, eschew corruption, and sometimes outright thievery that this government is known to be engaged in.
How would John Mahama change all of that should he win the 2024
First
elections?
and foremost, we chalked the highest we ever chalked under the Corruption Perception Index in this country, under President Mahama. The lowest of President Mahama is what they are celebrating today. All manner of lies were peddled against President Mahama. How he built hotels in Dubai, how he's not a scintilla of evidence. Not a scintilla. Now he sits here and he says that we bought the Mahindra vehicles, state money, and distributed them to the party. How irresponsible a political party can the MPP be? So we did that. You didn't see the need to prosecute anybody. You didn't see the need that the NBC used state money to procure Mahindra vehicles and distributed those vehicles. You didn't see the need to prosecute those who engage in such, because that is a crime.
Yes.
And I was happy when you told him that is a serious allegation.
Yes. So Mahama also says that he will run this country with about 60 ministers. We heard this before in the past, where Akufo-Addo said that he would run the country leaner. But when he came, the story wasn't really different. What I'm saying is that there's a difference between talking on a political platform and then being met with the reality.
Don't compare President Nana Addo with President Mahama.
Why not?
Everybody knows that he's been infected with the falsehood that his vice president peddles every day. Everybody knows. Why?
So now the boss is being infected by the junior.
Nana Addo is incompetent, but the lies, the falsehood, unfortunately, it's infectious. He got it from his boss. Such a person wants to lead this country. But you see, when you ask Prof and Mr. Jackson on the issue of President Mahama, giving back the license of these financial institutions, they didn't say it is not possible. They said it is going to be difficult.
And the practical
presidents are elected to find solutions to difficult problems. And that is precisely what President Mahama is going to do. Take Heritage Bank, for example. Can anyone provide me reasons why that bank was also collapsed? Can anybody provide me with a reason? Just one. Because if you say they could not vouch for the source of the money that was used to establish the bank because he was being prosecuted, go to Cocoa Board. Find out who is now supplying Cocoa Board with the chemicals. The very reason for which some people are being
Who is providing it?
You should find out from him.
But you are making that. He doesn't know.
I'm asking a rhetorical question. Rhetorical questions do not necessarily.
But why are you pointing? He doesn't know.
He's in government. Who is providing it? Who is providing it?
No,
what is the relationship? What is the relationship with the company the company that is providing the owner and the family of the president. What is the relationship? He should be telling us.
I see.
You see, there's another point. When President Mahama talked about 16 ministers, the NDC demonstrated that President Mills had 74 ministers. President Mahama came with 85 ministers. This president initially had 115 to 120 ministers. Now today they are telling us that, even with 16 regions, and he likes making that statement, even with 16 regions, we have reduced it to 80 something. You've done that because you do not have deputy ministers. The numbers...
So it's part of it?
No, I'm saying how many regions have we created? 5. How many deputies?
Hold on. You have option of appointing
please.
Bringing governors to the doorstep of the people.
He's telling us that they have reduced it even with 16 regions. Now tell the people, tell the people that even you have reduced it with 16 regions because there are no longer deputy ministers. NDC had a number which was less than what we have even reduced, but with deputy ministers. Are you getting the logic? NDC had the numbers we had, even lower than what we are now claiming we should celebrate, because they included deputy ministers. If NDC was at that time to remove even deputy minister, it should have been less. So we have demonstrated that you have 54 members, direct family members of this government working in this administration. Let me finish. Including his bosses in-laws. Including his bosses in-laws, who, by the way, were not even MPP, were PNC. Yet people suffered. People suffered for your party. You found spaces.
Which in-law? Ramadan.
Yes, of course.
It's an appointee of the government.
Who's government?
Of this government.
No, but your point is what?
What's the point?
I'm saying that including in-laws.
No, but yes.
What's the point?
Yes. You're asking me my point. Let me.
Yes, but I'm
saying that they have appointed to the extent that they have appointed in-laws who are not even members of the MPP. They are members of the
government. Should only be MPP.
No, they want.
We've been crying for all.
No, they have created so much space to increase and appoint. When President Nanado went to Kumasi, February 2016, and said that he was not going to run family and friends government. At the time when he was making that statement, there was only one family member of President Mahama who was serving in his administration. It was Joyce Bauer. Joyce Bauer, prior to her appointment, had been a practicing lawyer for 18 years. Joyce Bauer was made a deputy minister. President Nanado and the wife found space to say that they were not going to run family and friends government. You had the likes of Professor Adai, who went to town and said that President Mahama was running family and friends government when they knew that there was only one family member. Today, 54 family members. It is state capture. Every aspect. And the only way you can get appointment in this government. And I'm telling the MPP, disgruntled and angry MPP people who are
become family members.
No, they should go swear affidavit.
That's what.
And add Oforiata to their name or Baumia to their name. Once you add these two names,
yes,
the last one, the Association of Unemployed Graduates, they were MPP creations.
Yes, it's okay. Yes.
I think my brother has taken all the time.
Somebody says that politicians, you guys are politicians.
Yeah, he's taking all the
politicians talk, and nothing is done. I'm amazed they cannot see that the nation is deteriorating.
No, the
nation is deteriorating.
The issue is that you've allowed my senior brother. And
you have the next 5 minutes. You have the next 5 minutes to deal with.
Because it's my senior brother.
You said infantile. You use infantile. I haven't even used that.
No problem.
You describe us as infantile.
Do not use your 4-5 minutes.
I've not gone for my.
No, but he described us as infantile.
Allow him to finish.
I said it's kind of the logic. It's infantile to think of that.
It's just the same one.
In the first place, the country that he has mentioned about inflation, Franco, there has never been a time in the history, especially in the Fourth Republic, that inflation in Ghana has been lower than those countries. Not even one single moment.
So we should celebrate.
We are making analysis. You want to inform people. There have never been one single moment where the inflation of the country is lower than the country approval.
And I'm saying, give me my
absolutely not. Has always
been higher. Because of the.
We can verify that.
We can verify that and tell me.
We can verify that.
This is just simple. I'm saying the Franco.
Even the French-speaking countries.
Can you go verify that for me?
Make that point.
Now, you would make a good analysis if you look at within the period of the crisis, but how much have these countries' inflation gone up as compared to your country? I've said on many platforms that this country, inflation is a serious one for us, and everyone is feeling the pinch. But it is not quite good for you to sit on national platform to do analysis that is so misleading, to do analysis that is supposed to, that amounts to peddle of falsehood.
Which one?
So I think that needs to be made. But I need to make an important point. Look, it is quite unreligious for you to take moral lesson in a brothel. You cannot. You cannot take lessons on morality
from a brothel.
In fact, from a prostitute. Okay, there may be some men of God who have gone to the brothel to preach, and you can take some lessons from them, but you cannot take even the lesson from a prostitute. On the issue of corruption, he has mentioned someone has been described as Madam Serpent of corruption, and that has become an authority for him to cite to justify.
But you wrote on the back of what
to justify the fact that someone is corrupt, but he has failed, and he has clearly gone off. The fact the same person had described the President Mahama has been under investigation for Airbus.
Was he?
But of course, the same person said it. The same person, his description, the same person said it. Okay, for the corruption involved in that. Okay, there have been international journalists on this oil transaction where transactions were bloated on the back of pay or take.
Take or pay.
Take or pay arrangement. Okay. He has forgotten about that. That's what I'm saying. That it is when corruption is mentioned in this country, the synonym for that is their leader.
Oh, really?
The synonym for that is their leader. So for me, I don't even want to go to the extent of discussing corruption about the extent of because I don't see the moral ground upon which he would mount and tell us. You and I can talk about it because. Probably we have not been in government at the top, and we've not. I'm also in government. I'm also in government,
and I'm not corrupt, and I've never been. So I can talk about corruption.
My brother, he has mentioned within people in his own party they have gotten ill-gotten money, filthy money on record.
All right.
So members of his party. No, he has given me more time. Let me use my time. Allow me to use my time.
You have 1 minute.
No, allow me. You gave me enough time. 20 minutes of conversation. And I'm left with 8 minutes, and I'm supposed to use this. I'm supposed to use this 30 minutes.
So do the most critical part.
This subject matter. Look, John Mahama has gone to make promises. Promises that he had opportunity as a minister of state to deliver. Promises that he had opportunity as a vice president to deliver. Promises that he had opportunity as a president of the Republic of Ghana for about at least 4 and some 6 months, years to deliver. He never delivered them. Now, some 6 years down the line, he thinks that he has changed. He thinks that Ghanaians should believe that he has really changed. He thinks that we should come, putting him on the throne to lead this country to deliver something different. I would think that Ghanaian people are discerning. I would not want to belittle their judgment. I will not want to be the one to determine, because I have a single vote, just like any other person. I will not be the person to determine that. But I am convinced in my mind, and I have no doubt whatsoever, that you can tell. You can tell, but just parade the two leaders. You can tell who is more credible. You can
so is Bawumia winning? Bawumia winning the MPP race?
Bawumia is winning the MPP race. There's no doubt whatsoever about it. And
that should make you happy, because you have 2 people from your region.
You can call me,
and it means one of them
and one is credible and one is not.
You can call me,
and one is not truthful, one is truthful.
After November 2023, to ask this question, that I said Dr. Bawumia is going to win the MPP primaries and is going to beat John Mahama in the 2024 election.
Very well.
We will play this thing.
So we'll play it. So that's how we conclude.
He's talking about.
That's how we conclude the program.
You have the
today.
guy, the head of Buffer Stock. My
so that's a new.
Yes,
that's a birthday wish. Quickly.
My former colleague in the office, Manaf Ibrahim.
Okay, today's
he's coming to overthrow Mutaka.
Okay,
so he has his birthday.
All right. So that's how we conclude today's edition of the program. My guest, Dr. Tia Abdul Kabiru Mahama, Technical Advice Office of the Vice President, and then Ibrahim Mutala Mohammed, Member of Parliament on the ticket of the NDC for the Tamale Central constituency. These two gentlemen, I tell you. Thanks so much for doing the listening. My name is Selam Adunu. Catch you again same time next week.